All right, I'll go ahead and do an introduction real quick to my work session for Public Works. We're gonna be going over some things about the Aquifer Storage Recovery Unit. We did one before, but that I think was in October or so. And this time it's just kind of not a rehash, but just revisit it and ask questions if you have them. We have all this stuff online already as well. And once they are done with the presentation for the Aquifer Storage Recovery Unit, I know we talked a little bit about, independence and, water security and stuff like that for the city. And, this is kind of tying in with some of those discussions that we had yesterday. And after they give their presentation, then I'll kind of go into my presentation, which originally I kind of had the director's cut, which was gonna be like 30 or 40 different slides. And I'm like, I'm gonna save you from that. And I just kind of switched how I was gonna do anything. And on these 2 sheets of paper, I kind of hit the highlights of the budget. And I think that's what you were more interested in anyway. But there's a few other things that I wanted to talk about besides this, and hopefully it won't take the entire hour, and that will give us a little bit of a break time before the meeting at 7. So hopefully we'll have things running pretty smoothly. And with that, here's Larry and Ryan with Summit, and they're gonna talk about the Aquifer storage recovery, which was funded by a grant that we had, and just kind of what the plan is and some things that we can do going forward in the future.
Thanks, Dustin. Ryan Doherty, hydrogeologist with Summit Water Resources.
Oh, and I'm Larry, also with Summit Water Resources. He's gonna do all the work. I'm just here to support him.
Thanks, Larry. So yeah, this is just a quick recap of the presentation we gave back in October. I'll try and just breeze through this real quick. Go ahead. So this graphic shows, demonstrates the project needs. So over on the right, you see this one blue bar, that's your current supply capacity. You only have one source, which is a connection with the JWC. And per your contract with the JWC, you can get about 1.05 million gallons per day. Those orange and red lines are your demand projections. So how your demands are going to grow over the future. You can see that the maximum day demand, the red line, is already above your current supply capacity. So that's typically not ideal. You want to have more supply capacity than your maximum day demand. You do have another source for you. You had a question?
Sorry, just for those of us wearing glasses and trying to read that, the bottom line is the actual and the top line is the
orange line is the average day demand. So just for any given day of the year, that's the average demand. The maximum day is typically like, the hottest day of the summer. Everyone's watering their lawn, washing their car kind of thing.
Got it. Thank you so much. Just
Yeah.
couldn't read the.
No problem. And feel free to, if you have a question or comment, just, chime in.
Well, make sure you have those are off. Provision eye chart, the bottom's the years, the middle is gonna be 2030.
Middle is to 2030.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The far right is 2040.
All right, so it's a 20-year span, all right. It's really hard to see.
Yeah, sorry. I
It's like 8.
think the lighting too makes it hard.
Middle light, probably the lights.
You can.
Well, any of
I
it
mean,
could be on.
I think we can agree that this compellingly shows that we're not where we need to be, and that's
Right,
okay.
yeah.
Like, I don't need to. suss
Yeah,
out
we don't
the
need to
granular
dissect
details.
it.
My
That's-
apologies for pulling us off track. I
No,
just
no.
didn't read it.
You're totally good. I mean, want to have any questions or comments, so. Yeah, typically you want to have multiple water sources so that if you have an issue with one, you've got a backup. And right now your backup is well 3, but the current capacity of well 3 is only 15 gallons a minute, which, if you lose the JWC line for whatever reason, an earthquake or whatever it is, that well 3 is not going to be able to meet your demands.
What about Lind Reservoir?
What's that?
Lind Reservoir.
I think combined your 2 reservoirs get you, a couple days of supply capacity, but what was the reservoir you mentioned?
Lind, we got a big pond.
That's not part of our.
Yeah, it's not a registered drinking water source. Could become that. It would take some work and permitting and all that.
And where's well number 1 and number 2 are contaminated?
No, they're not contaminated. That was definitely something that, you know, we know you guys have had on your radar in the past, from the, what is it, the Dan and Russell site. We haven't confirmed any detection from that site, but, there is elevated metals in native groundwater, so I think that's kind of where the confusion came from. But it's not contamination from anthropogenic
Which is
sources.
pHs and stuff, that's stuff that's man-made.
Right. Next slide. All right, so this is just a conceptual illustration of what aquifer storage and recovery is. So you're basically taking excess water during the winter when you don't need it. You're storing it underground in an aquifer and then taking it out later for when you do need it. So, you know, we get a lot of rain in the winter. We don't need all of it, store it in the ground. Take it out in the summer when we don't have any precipitation, basically, is the concept. Yeah, any questions on that?
We discussed this a couple of times already, right?
What's that?
We discussed the ground storage a couple of times already.
Yeah,
And I thought it was a good idea, we should go forward with it.
Yes.
yeah, that was our recommendation. Everything looks feasible, for a new drinking water source for the city.
Just looking at that graphic where it's talking about surface water intake, I would assume that's a little more complicated of how we get rainwater down into this, or,
Yeah, so for how it would look for you guys, you would be using the JWC's intake on the Tualatin River. The JWC would be treating it at their treatment plant. You're purchasing that water and then you're storing it under the ground.
so it's still going, sorry, we are starting from square one on this.
Okay.
I appreciate, James, you have gotten all of this a couple times, and this is probably boring for you, but I'm learning. So this would still be coming through our 16-inch pipe where all the rest of our water is. Did we talk about that already, of how that would be accommodated slowly, gradually with our residential and commercial use that shares that same pipe?
We broached or unless Dustin, you have something, but we discussed with JWC about expanding that capacity through the line to, you know, meet your growing demands and also provide water for aquifer storage and recovery. And it seemed like the JWC was open to a larger contract or something, so.
Fantastic. And if I'm jumping ahead to a next slide, I apologize, but how long would it take to, at whatever capacity we would be pulling that water to fill the aquifer?
Yeah, we'll get to that.
We'll get to
Okay,
Next slide.
all right. See, I'm just eager.
Did you have a question or?
I'll reserve my comment at the end. Or at the end.
All right, this slide is just to quickly show all the different ASR projects in the state of Oregon. The one common thing they all have is they're all completed in the basalts. The basalts are really good for storing water. It's a hard rock aquifer system. So you put water in, it's not gonna move and you're gonna lose it all. It's gonna stay typically pretty close to where you inject it. Next slide. All right, gonna touch on just a couple quick key findings from our study. So I know you can't see this very well, but we looked at 2 potential ASR sites. The first one is on the west side of town where you have your existing well number 3 and a reservoir.
Reservoir one, yep.
Yep, and then the other site is on the east side of town off West Union, where you have your new 2 million gallon reservoir.
The new facility.
So if well 2 is contaminated, what's the risk if we go there with the aquifer?
We'll kind of touch on that in a minute. No, you're good.
Next page.
Okay, so the key findings, I know this is a boring text slide, but ASR appears feasible at both sites, but Water Station 2, which is on the east side of town, scored more favorably because there's fewer potential contaminant sources nearby. And there's some aspects about the existing infrastructure that make it more favorable for integration. There are some challenges with either site, including you can't meet all the regulatory setbacks outright, but not typically a problem when you're talking about a deep basalt aquifer like this. They'll usually waive those setback requirements. Pumping interference, there is that will happen, and affect existing groundwater wells nearby, but we only, modeled one nearby well to have adverse impacts. And the way to kind of deal with that is you either turn down the rate at which you're injecting, so turn the faucet down so that the interference isn't as much, or you can potentially obtain that well and convert it to a monitoring well for your ASR program. Previously, when we discussed that, it seemed like that was probably going to be the most feasible path because that landowner was going to be selling their land or something and not needing the well in the future. So, and then I think this is probably the one you guys are most interested in. Native groundwater in this area does have elevated concentrations of metals like arsenic and manganese. Like I mentioned earlier, there aren't any indications that those levels are due to man-made anthropogenic stuff like the Danton Russell contaminated site or any arsenic and manganese are naturally occurring in basalt aquifers. But we expect with ASR, because you're injecting this water that's treated to drinking water standards, you're pushing away the native groundwater, creating a bubble of stored water that's still capable of meeting drinking water standards. There is some mixing and blending at the edges of that bubble of stored water. But our modeling shows that it shouldn't be an issue on the recovery side when you got to take the water out. You should still be able to meet drinking water standards. And this is something we've observed.
Yeah, Cornelius.
Yeah. Cornelius, we're the hydrogeologists of record for them. They had a similar thing when they first started their ASR program. A lot of elevated constituents that didn't meet drinking water standards that people were very concerned about. But after a couple cycles of ASR, you keep building this bubble larger and larger, this stored water. You push away the native groundwater, and now we're seeing at Cornelius no issues.
Building a buffer, so basically that buffer gets bigger and bigger. You leave a little bit of water, basically it's slow excess water. So you're keeping the native groundwater at bay. Cornelius had 800 parts per million on TDS, which is way above the standards. And we're the water is actually meets a JWC standards, so.
Way over hours?
What's that?
Do you know our concentration that we had?
I don't remember off the top of my head the concentrations, but arsenic and manganese were the two big ones.
Right, and from what I remember was, because it sits there and it just absorbs. Once you cycle through it, it goes away, right? Or I guess the diluted, is that correct?
Yeah, that's
Removed?
generally the gist of it. I mean, you're pushing it away. There's always going to be some of that arsenic and manganese that you can't move. It gets absorbed into the, the fine particles of the rock, and like it's always going to be there. But from what we've seen, Beaverton, Cornelius, Tigard, and what the modeling shows here, it shouldn't be an issue.
So just to clarify also that this would only be used for emergency circumstances rather than daily water.
It's
Or
really,
is it
however,
something that kind of just gets refreshed?
it's up to you. I mean,
It's like another reservoir, just
it's
Yeah.
another
fill
reservoir.
it up, yeah.
Okay, so I guess what I'm wondering is a couple different sides of this, that first of all, is there a limit to how long we can leave it there? And, after a certain point, it is no longer good, or that bubble begins to break down. And the other thing is there any kind of ongoing monitoring, or would we have some idea of how to, if you're saying 800 million, and I am not the expert in this space, is potentially not safe, how would we address that responsibly so that when, granted, if it's an emergency situation, all water is better than no water, but how do we mitigate that?
Right, so your first question, Larry, chime in if I got anything wrong here, but typically, like, you can keep stored water in the ground for, 4 years, keep it as fresh as it was the day you put it in there. If you're continually doing ASR cycles, so injecting, then recovering, injecting, recovering, that can increase quite a bit.
Yeah, we like to exercise the wells. The other thing too is these ASR projects are monitored. They're under DEQ. also under Oregon Water Resources Department and Department of Health. So there's rigorous sampling. So before you turn that well on, even in an emergency, you're gonna do at least a back T, but you probably already have data that you collected on what the quality of that water is.
Yeah, there's extensive sampling and all that to make sure that, you know, what's going in the ground, you're not gonna impair the aquifer. And then when you pull it out, that it's gonna be protective of public health.
Fantastic. I would not have expected anything other than that, but I just wanted to hear your specific.
Yeah.
Outline. Perfect.
Yep. So here's just a slide showing the preliminary ASR well design, so it'd be about 1,000 feet deep. So the injection rates and then volumes are shown there along with the recovery rates and volumes. So we're estimating that you could probably get about 50 to 100 million gallons in the ground any given year. And then during recovery, you could pull out, you know, 45 to, let's just call it 90 million gallons.
Yeah, we usually inject for about 6 months and maybe you recover for a shorter period of time.
Right, but again, this is assuming that you're using this to augment your existing supply, so you're using it every day. But if, you know, there are places where they just want to have it as a backup source and they're not using it every day like this scenario.
Can you explain to them how much, in a case of an emergency, if everything shuts down, how many days supply do we have in our current reservoirs? How many days supply would we have if we had a full ASR?
Right.
Yes.
So if you lost the JWC supply line, your storage reservoirs, I think, would get you about, let's just say 5 days, maybe a little bit less, so not much. And that's where ASR really comes into play for a lot of water systems, because with this, you could meet demands for, you know, we've provided the volumes as a range here, so I think it equates to about like 90 to 140 or 50 days.
Depending on the rate.
Yeah, depending on the rate. So you, instead of only having 5 days of water, now you've got, you know, months of water to meet demands during an emergency.
And the other thing I could add is that, you know, wells, let's say the JWC goes out to a seismic event. There's some sort of major earthquake. Wells actually survive quite well during the seismic event because the ground motions go through. You got a casing that's in there, it's solid. And there's been research done all over the world about this. And the other thing is this reservoir, this ASR wells, we always have backup generators. So when you lose power due to an earthquake, you still have a generator. Of course, you're gonna run out of fuel eventually. You can't get more fuel there. So you have a backup.
Which we have at the new facility. That's what it was designed for, to take care of that.
And that's the generator and fuel, or?
Yes,
And the reservoir itself,
and the reservoir itself. So
which was why this was, you know, that site floated to the top was like, well, if the main purpose here is emergency backup, earthquake resiliency, let's pair it with the infrastructure you already have that's earthquake resilient.
No, that's fantastic.
ready for the next one?
So here's the planning level capital costs, just shy of 4 million, which included a 30% contingency, although I would say with steel prices currently, that contingency's probably been eaten up. But if you look at this on a cost per million gallons of in-town storage, Water Station 2, that equated to about $1.60 per million gallons of storage. This is where ASR really becomes an easy sell for a lot of systems, is the price per million gallons is, you know, a lot cheaper, even though the capital costs are pretty high.
You mentioned that there was the one existing well that might be affected, and I'm sure Bill and Dustin, you're familiar with the property owner, and there maybe been some preliminary conversations there that they're theoretically amenable. Where has this been evaluated from an environmental impact standpoint? You know, this is not going to have, I'm reaching here, but you know, some sort of seismic impact in and of itself from us messing with the salt and all of the rest of that. Can you just help reassure me, and by extension, everybody else, that this is a safe and well thought out practice?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I had that same thing posed to me 20 years ago in Tigard. People from the audience, like, okay, you're gonna inject, you've heard about where the military injects stuff in, all of a sudden it causes an earthquake, you lubricate the faults. Well, the difference here is we're in the salt, and that is really solid, hard rock. And you're not gonna move that hard rock by injecting, because we're not putting in that much pressure. So that is highly, highly unlikely. So from an environmental standpoint, we'd have to look at that. That's where we can't degrade the natural occurring aquifer. That's part of the job. And outside of that, think of any other environmental surface. We're not connected to surface streams or water bodies because we're down deep and we're sealed off.
Right, the main environmental impact that we assessed as part of this study was is mixing of, surface water from the JWC with native groundwater. Is that going to produce any adverse chemical reactions, change the water quality in the native aquifer? And the modeling shows that it shouldn't. And that's what the data has shown from all these projects across the Tualatin Basin.
Super, thank you so much.
So this is just kind of showing the potential benefits, using the low end of our estimates for one well. So before we had, the one blue bar for your existing supply, and now we've added a second for one ASR well, which doesn't get you out to 2040, but it certainly helps with your supply capacity. And then the plot on the right is more of the storage evaluation, showing your existing storage capacity is 3 million gallons, but you add one ASR well, and now you've got an extra about 50 million gallons more. So I think that was it. I think, recommended next steps, of course. So everything looks feasible from our end. Next steps would be to apply for an ASR limited license with the Oregon Water Resources Department, address some remaining data gaps, which is, what is the water quality near Water Station 2? Is it different than what we see on the west side of town? My guess is it's better because we're farther from existing groundwater users, stuff like that. And, we've talked about this existing private well nearby that would need to be converted to a monitoring well, or there needs to be some kind of mitigation there because the hydraulic interference would affect them. And then pursue funding opportunities for construction.
What does the timeline usually look like? If you have any preview into that, that ASR license process, and then the actual construction, and then how long it takes to actually fill it. If we decided today, which we're not, but if we decided right now, how long would it take before our residents are turning on their tap and they're pulling ASR water?
I think we had in the report, it's about 3 years. Might have been a little bit longer. I don't remember the exact number, but the license is about a year. And then, assuming you've got funding for construction, the construction's probably 2 years is a conservative estimate.
Well, which takes that deep well like that, it takes 6 months. And then construction of the pump station and everything else. So 3 years would be, I've seen it take longer, but 3 years is a fair estimate. It's not fast. I mean, you can try to accelerate it, but it is what it is.
Fair enough. And is this something where, sorry, Mandy, where you're seeing that there are, only 2 companies that do this in Oregon, and they have a long list of folks waiting for this that we might have to get in line, or generally people are able to execute it fairly seamlessly?
I'd say the biggest lead time is drilling contractors. For a well of this scale, you're probably 3 contractors could do the job, or that's who you'd only want to do the job.
Yeah.
And they're booked out at least 8 months typically.
And as far as, engineers, Stantec did work for you, but there's multiple engineering firms that can design pump stations, stuff like that. There's hydrogeologists, which we do. But the drilling is kind of lead time, and there's equipment and construction, and one of the construction companies will come out and do this. There's a series of them that have done lots of pump stations. But it takes time. You got to put everything together and get bids. And
What conditional funding can we get for this?
So we identified a couple different funding programs that seem like they'd be a good fit. Assuming you're not in a hurry, The best one was the Oregon Water Resources Department's water project grants and loans, and it's basically a 25-75 cost share, so you would pay 25% of the capital costs. They pay 75%. The catch is, there is like a 2-year schedule delay for them to. They do some environmental impact review on their own that, it takes about 2 years before they award the funding, so. But as far as like, everything else is basically like a 30-year loan, low interest loan to low market rate, which is, that's how most water infrastructure projects are financed. But I mean, if you've got someone who's gonna pay 75% of the capital.
Yeah.
All right, my turn. Yeah, that's your cue to be quiet, James. My question is, you had a slide on here that had a whole bunch of your other projects in different cities, and I saw Banks, which kind of gave me an aha moment. I know that Banks is currently working on a lot of they're exploring other ways to expand their capacity. I do know that they have multiple storage aquifers too, and I was wondering if there's any opportunities to partner or synergize on the effort that they're working on.
There could be, so we're supporting City of Banks. We're actually gonna start drilling and constructing their first ASR well this summer. I think for there to be a partnership, I mean, you'd have to have an intertie, right? Otherwise, how are you gonna share water, or how are you gonna make that work? How many miles is that between you?
6.
Right, and that doesn't exist right now, but I mean, that could be something to explore in the future. A partnership, because they have surface water sources, the springs up in the hills. They just got a new surface water right for West Fork of Dairy Creek.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, it could be something worth exploring.
New water source. Alternative to buying.
This might be a question for Dustin, but let's say we move forward with ASR. Is there any additional training that would need to be completed by staff or certifications for the aquifer?
Potentially, yes. And we would definitely have to add more staff, and there's gonna be more monitoring equipment that goes along with it. As far as like chlorination or anything like that, that's all that water is coming in from JWC. It's already treated. So what we're doing is we're putting the treated water, pushing it in, putting the bad water out basically, and we only need to have treatment there as an emergency, and that's something that we can build in with the project, which we already have in the current facility that we have. We have the ability to treat an emergency, but we don't. But yes, there's gonna be some additional training that we would have to do for monitoring, yes.
Thank you.
What about then reservoir?
This is actually the first I have heard anything about using Lynn Reservoir, because it's actually out of the city limits. So that wasn't even brought in as an option to be able to do that. Maybe if that's something, I don't know.
Explore
what-
irrigation rights, whether they cross over when we get sold the property, things like that. There's
Yeah.
a big question mark right now,
Yeah, it's pretty close there, right? So how many million gallons that is.
but that's pumped in.
And I don't know where they get their water from, so I can't really answer too much. But that would have to be treated, and that is a much more complicated process, and I would have to hire, an entire completely different person to be able to do water treatment.
So follow-up question to that, it sounds like we're not actually doing water treatment, all we're doing is putting fresh water in except for an emergency, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, never mind, that answered another question.
And what about the well that's on someone's land that we're considering, they're bringing to UGB, is that the Vendome piece there?
Yes, it's the Van Donlands, if that were to ever brought in, that would basically be like a potential monitoring well more than anything.
What is monitoring?
It's a well that's close to where we're putting water in and out, so it's another straw in the bathtub. Pressure about what's going on, and that one, it would probably have a cap on it, because the water could go above and flow out of the well depending on the pressure. So
But not big enough to be source.
Well, I don't think I followed that.
Not big enough to be like our own well source to where we would have to, treat it.
This additional well we're talking about turning into a monitoring isn't
Just as
substantial enough.
monitoring, you just,
Probably not. I mean, you could probably get a small amount of water out of it. Whether it meets current state well construction standards is another question, but typically doesn't pencil out for municipal water system to purchase domestic wells and use those.
Oh, fair enough. So I think asking maybe the question in a different way, this is extremely helpful, and I want to make sure that we leave time for Dustin to talk about what he wants to as well. But
Sorry, Dustin.
Oh, no, it's okay. This is a good, this talks about our future in water security. And that's a really big topic that we need to get through.
yeah, I'm so grateful for you including this as part of our work session. I think it's super important. Just because we have extra smart people in the room, ideally, even like I said, if we decided right now, which we're not, to start this, it's a 3-year process. And you have very clearly illustrated that we're not in a great position now as far as our risk to that 16-inch pipe and, our volume that's available overall. And let me know if this isn't appropriate, but smart people in the room, if you were sitting here in our position and we at the very least needed to get through the next 3 years while we work towards a better plan, are there any intermediate steps that you would recommend that would help us with our resilience and our water source in the meantime? The answer can be no.
I mean, the first thing that comes to my head is well 3, it's not ideal. Your existing well 3, it's old, blah, 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 but if you just put in a larger pumping system in case of an emergency, I mean, at least then you have some. I don't know, you can sleep easier knowing that like if there is an emergency, you lose the JWC pipeline. You could turn it on and get more than 15 gallons a minute out. Maybe you can get 200 gallons a minute out.
yeah, I think original test on that was just a couple hundred gallons a minute.
Yeah, I think originally it did 400 gallons a minute maybe. So like, I mean, I could probably do 200-300 gallons a minute now. Water quality is not ideal. Would probably get some complaints from people, but in an emergency scenario, better to have wet water than no water, so.
That's exactly my point. Thank you very much. I appreciate the suggestion.
Well, in a true emergency situation, I mean, water would essentially be shut off and people would be bringing their jugs there. Is that,
Well-
dire straits, like that's.
Right now, if the JWC were to shut off an earthquake, we would have to find ways to shut everything off first of all. And I would have, curtailment. And that's one of the things that, as part of emergency management, I'd be working with the rest of the county on like, what do we need to do? Like if there's gonna be, we'd have to have certain rules where you can't use water more than this, like there's a whole process that would go on with curtailing water, and we try to minimize water use as much as possible. And if that means people coming to jugs of water, that's something that needs to be part of the emergency management plan. And I'm actually working on that with the county to kind of figure out what we need to do. That's kind of a requirement with the JWC agreement that is going to be coming up. It's just kind of we have to have a curtailment plan in place, which we've got like a rudimentary one, but that's something that we need to define a little bit more. With an ASR, we've got up to 90 to 150 days to figure things out. And we could just we'd still curtail, but we would be almost business as usual because some of these fixes probably won't take 140 days. But then again, if there's a major event, this could be happening everywhere and everybody's going to have the same situation. But that would give us a little bit more time in the case of an emergency than 5 to 7 days with the reservoirs that we have now.
Well, and what about expanding our reservoir number 1? Or, I mean,
There's not a lot of room there to expand there in the first place. And the water, even though it's not from the contaminated, site that we're talking about there, it's still contaminated and would have to be treated. And that pump station needs to be rehauled majorly in order to really do anything. And so the cost is not that, it's not efficient otherwise to use that to rehab that area over there. So that's why putting in aquifer storage recovery facility would be the best option at this point.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about this 3-year interim and what are some of our quicker fixes? Like, I'm just trying, I'm spitballing.
Yeah.
more than anything, so.
I get it.
Well, and I'm relieved to hear that there's already work being done on those curtailment plans and things like that, because that more fully fleshed out disaster recovery type scenario, we don't want to not have water because someone took a long shower. Yeah.
Counselor?
Two really quick questions. One is just to kind of piggyback off of Mayor Goodwin's question about, well 3, right, upgraded pump system, ballpark range. What would the dollar amount look like for an upgraded pump as a Band-Aid fix?
Just for the pump, probably 50K, maybe 75K. I don't know what other, Dustin,
That's just for the pump, but we have to put a
There's other-
generator. There was the arsenic removal, which there were plans that were done for arsenic removal, but that's very expensive over time. And that would require another certification and, training for the staff to be able to monitor that. But even then, the amount of water that we'd be able to pull out there isn't necessarily as much as we need to support the city also on top of that. So we're spending a lot of money for not a lot of return.
And then my second question, just kind of reading between the lines with my peers and some of their questions of how do we become self-sufficient with our own water supply? And maybe not reliant on JWC. I just want to clarify, Banks does not get their water from Joint Water Commission, correct?
correct.
Because they have their own wells and springs, right?
Yep.
Fast forward 20 years, is there even a remote possibility of North Plains ever being able to sustain their own water supply and treatment without JWC?
It would take a significant amount of investment to get there. First off, you can't get new water rights. That's pretty much off the table with the way things have gone in the state. So you'd be looking at potentially purchasing an existing water right. You'd then have to develop the infrastructure like a surface water treatment plant or something to be able to do that. I think your point about an intertie with Banks is an interesting thing to explore. That's not fully self-sufficient. You're relying on Banks then, but it's not the JWC. I don't know.
I understand they were actually talking about figuring out how to get water from, I can't remember if it was St. Helens or Scappoose. So
Really?
I'm wondering if there's some lessons learned or maybe a conversation to be had to understand what they're incubating and to bring into the choice point mix. And maybe it's just an idea that could be had from talking to them.
Or share the cost of bringing it over.
Yeah, it'd be worth exploring. Yeah, that's where everything, rubber hits the road is when you find out, you cost out all these alternatives and see what pencils out. And I know for Banks, they were kind of going through this, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago about should we just bite the bullet and connect to the JWC and become a wholesale customer, or do we want to have our own self-sufficient system? And that's ultimately what they went with. They had pretty good springs and they were able to get a surface water right for West Fork Dairy Creek, which is right there. So a little different situation, but. Yeah, I think in the long term, it might have been cheaper to do the JWC option, but they really wanted that self-sufficiency. That was important to them.
Well, thank you. I know there's a lot to unpack here and I can put more information. I can probably do like an FAQ page or something if I get questions, the report itself, the actual report that is, I don't remember how many pages it was. This is the condensed version is online. And so if anybody has any questions, I can actually do more of a FAQ in the future. We can kind of go from there. But thank you for doing this presentation. I know I'm trying to get my own presentation in as well. This is only.
Sorry.
They're gonna kick us out.
Well, these are really good questions because it goes along with water security and our future. That's a really important thing.
Right.
But thank you.
We're always available by Teams calls too.
Yeah, if you guys have any follow-up questions, happy to answer.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Nice meeting you both.
So with that, I am really glad I didn't go with a 30-page PowerPoint presentation. So, the first part, I'm just gonna kind of show you a couple of things, just kind of get some things out of the way, just.
Have our attention. I'm listening.
just kind of show you where some information is, and I don't want to insult your intelligence, but one of the things I've been trying to do in the last 2 years is be open and transparent as much as I can with the time that I have. And so almost everything that I get that is important to Public Works is already on the website. And if you go to Public Works Department, you know, for people who are viewing everything, you go up here to our community, or actually government. You go to Public Works. And right here. And everything that the city does, we've got a little bit of a news updates on here. We have all of our responsibilities that we do as a city. Everything, water services, 25 miles of water infrastructure, 800 mainline valves, 185 hydrants. We've got a lot of stuff that we maintain in the city through all these different things, and I'm trying to update exactly what it is we do. One of the things I wanted to get across, we only have 5 staff, me and 4 workers. I was joking with Bill, there are golf courses with more maintenance staff than we have for the entire city. So just kind of keep that in mind. And so we do what we can to keep the city running as much as possible. With that, communication is really key. Some of this information has been on here for a while. If you go to How Do I at the very top, there's report and issue. This has been on here for a while. You can go down here. I prefer this method. So if people are complaining on Facebook about something, please point them towards this, because this will actually get to the Public Works. Because if you call my office, sometimes I'm not in the office and I can't answer things right away. So if it goes to the email system, it can get directed to the right person very quickly. But we also have our on-call after hours emergency is listed on this page as well. And there's some kind of instructions of minor leaks, major leaks. Those are usually the big things that we kind of deal with. But if you go back to the Public Works page, all that contact information is even down here as well, and it's been there for a while. Just kind of, if anybody has any questions online, Facebook, or if you're going door to door, canvassing, whatever, it's like almost everything that you need to know is online. And if we need to put something else online, I can do it. And I have links here from everything to our engineering services, public projects. That's one thing I'm trying to keep updated as much as possible. In the next couple of weeks, I have 3J with their upcoming list of projects. And I'm gonna try to keep it up to date, and I'm gonna have as much as possible plans as I get them. Sometimes I have like 30% plans, or I have 90% plans on here. We're always kind of updated with the most up-to-date information. So I wanted to kind of get that out there, is that I'm trying to do our best at communicating and being transparent with what is going on in Public Works as much as possible.
I appreciate that.
With that, going into the budget, I know I've got just a few minutes now after that presentation. You can kind of read through some of this on your own, but these are some of the major things that are going to be happening that aren't capital projects. Because I know in the next couple of weeks when 3J comes in with their projects, this is kind of separate from that, just to kind of keep in mind some of the things that we need to go through. Landscaping and facility maintenance costs. One of the things that I was going back and forth with Bill was we probably need to get a new fund that is directly specific to facilities and landscaping. I know we kind of float around the idea of a landscaping fee or whatever, but I think I had sent out on one of the Friday Fives. We maintain 74 areas in town, 47 acres as is. Do we need to maintain all those areas? Well, probably 30 of those acres we can try to get rid of, but because we've been doing it for so long, it's not going to be an easy process. And that's when you have code enforcement going to be an issue. And it's actually going to take more time, effort, money to enforce those codes than it is to actually send a crew out there for 30 minutes to just kind of do it. And I think that's one of the reasons why it had been done that way for so many years. It was just easy to just do it instead of doing the right thing and enforcing the code. And so that's something that we need to take into consideration with the landscaping, is that if we want to enforce the code, it's probably going to take more time and effort from the staff to be able to do that. And just be prepared for some pushback, because I've gotten some pushback from residents already, because there's areas on town like Main Street. I do not know why we are maintaining that. But back 2006, 2007, whenever that was kind of redone, there's an irrigation line that I'm assuming was supposed to be temporary, ended up being permanent, and now we have been maintaining ever since. And there's other places around town that are like that as well. That is normally resident responsibility. You know. And so with everything said and done, I could hire 2 guys to do all the landscaping if we were to do it to standard. And that's quite an investment to be able to do that. I can cut some things down. I can even hire a landscape contractor, which we already have, do some of that. We're probably gonna spend maybe between $100,000 and $125,000 with a landscape contractor potentially. I'm still working with Showplace on getting kind of some of that information. And I'm just waiting on some of that information. I put in here just to kind of give you an idea. I said I regularly comb through 14 different funds. And so just wanted to let you know what I mean by that is that there's 14 different, you know, areas, like we have street and storm operations, water operations, Justin Mays operations. I even use the library, but it's not mine, but I have like facilities maintenance repair that I still have to use those codes and get with Robin about. We've got parks operating, events. Some of these things are more like fee and lieu. Maybe they have like 1 or 2 things in each of these funds, but I still have to kind of look through all these. Our transportation development tax, all these different things. There's 14 things I have to sift through every week to be code, everything. That's a big time suck, to be able to do that. And it's just me being able to do that. With that, we need a new, I'm kind of pushing forward as much as possible. We need a new water distribution operator, like yesterday, especially after finding out that TVWD is going to be pulling out of their agreement that they have with us, which is an agreement that I had originally started. You know, everything was nice, everything was fine, but they have another project that's going on that is taking priority. And so we're kind of way on the back burner. They might be able to help us every once in a while, but in order to do that, we need someone now. And also to take into consideration for the next budget. And so that's going to be something that I'm going to be working with here in the very short future is, you know, how are we going to fund that? And been just kind of auditing our own funds and the water funds and how that's going to work. And I might be able to do some of it, but we might have to do a supplemental budget in order to do that. And that's just that is a actual desire and need that we need as soon as possible. And with that, there comes equipment needs because TVWD also provides a lot of equipment and services that we do not have. You know, one, for example, is we've got that 16-inch line talking about emergencies and everything like that between here and Glencoe and Evergreen. If we are out there by hand, you know, we're turning, there's different amounts of turns. It's going to be 48 turns. We're going to get really tired really quick to be able to do the shut off an emergency. There's equipment that basically does everything automatically. That same piece of equipment will help us do our maintenance, our routine maintenance and everything for the rest of the city as well. So we've got little bits of equipment that we also have in addition to the staff on top of that. So that's something that I will be taking into consideration with the new personnel. In the future, there's a lot of wish list items. I kind of joked about golf courses have more personnel than we have. But if you look at other places like the city of Estacada, 5,000 people, they have 11 personnel in their public works department. There's other towns that have about 6,000 people that have up to 17. I have 5, including myself. So just kind of keep that in mind. I know we have a tight budget. Everybody else in here has a tight budget as well, but we're providing a service, especially water, that needs to be priority. And that's something that I want to make sure that we aren't skimping on. I just wanted to kind of bring that to your attention that those are going to be my focuses on priorities first. And we'll kind of work through there during this budget season. But if you have any other questions, I know we've got like a minute or two before your meeting. And you could potentially ask me some questions that might be related when I get my report later on.
I was just gonna suggest that as kind of a way to use our time, because I know I've got some thoughts based on, these are really great 2 pages of info. Anybody else want to do something real quick, or let's continue the conversation under reports, and I think maybe even some other avenue after that, whether it's coming in and talking to you at the office or quite what, but I've definitely am hearing you that this is a complex and nuanced and highly important issue, and we need a little more time to keep talking details.
Yeah, I'll be asking you later on, probably immediately, I guess I'm talking something, I'll probably be asking about efficiencies. Not that I'm challenging you, just I want to understand more of what we all have and what we're using for it, and what the possibilities are to have a better equipment or whatever, so.
If we need to do another, I know the ASR discussion took a little bit more time than I was expecting. But if we need to do another work session to go over the rest of it, we totally can. Or just ask me during the whenever I do my report.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Alrighty.
Thank you, Dustin.
All right, and being cognizant of the time, let's take 3 minutes. Stretch, breathe, and then we can open our meeting.
I'm just gonna do this.
Calling our meeting to order at 9:06. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. And happy St. Patrick's Day. Would you mind doing a roll call, please?
Mayor Goodwin, Counselor Dunbar,
Present.
Counselor Page.
Here,
Counselor Hagedorn. Here. Counselor McCall Wallace is excused this evening, Counselor Pippin.
Present.
And Counselor Redding.
Here.
Thank you.
Lori, with that microphones, how's it gonna sound? Do you know that on the recording?
With what?
Yeah, microphones. How's it gonna sound on the recording?
Like it always does?
Cool.
People really like this setup for one of the meeting.
Yeah.
The relook.
So that means
Yeah,
you two need to speak up just a little bit.
all righty. We have our approval of minutes. Do we need to discuss? Do we feel comfortable? Okay, any objections to approving our minutes for March 3rd?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries and minutes are approved. We have 2 public comments today. I have volunteer recruiting from Larry Gonzalez. And a lovely packet of information. Thanks, Larry. Do you want to come on up and speak?
So set up real quick. You're gonna use my setup in 3 minutes?
Yep.
So Larry Gonzalez, happy, St. Patrick's Day to all the Catholics and Irish folks and et cetera, et cetera. I wanted to, I was at the last meeting that, you were saying that you wanted to know some ideas about volunteer recruiting. I don't know if you pursued any of that or not, but thank you for having me here. Appreciate it. A couple of things that I did was I looked at Oregon Volunteer Demographics. These charts here are from 2016. They were done by the Portland State University folks. It gives you kind of an idea of what the demographics of volunteers in Oregon is and why they decided it was important to volunteer. So those first 2 graphs. The third graph, which is figure 10, goes over a little bit about how volunteers learn about the opportunities. And I know that one of the things that you were saying was that you wanted a different mix of folks and how to get a hold of people. And one of the things that it seems to be the most so we used the most was either newspaper ads or ads in the newsletters, et cetera. But my recommendation here is going to be that first couple that you see there. The volunteers ask people who they know, so people on your boards that are existing volunteer board members, ask them to get the word out for you. Two, I can't emphasize this enough, every time you go to a public event, anytime you individually speak to the public, let them know about the open board seats that are available and how to get a hold of, how to get information about that, because nothing sells volunteering for a board like the city council member. The other things that I mentioned in my notes were, use the Nice Pythias, the Chamber of Commerce, PTAs for the different schools, et cetera. And so make sure that you're looking at all that. I know the makeup of most of the folks on volunteer boards in Oregon is about 30% people over 60. Because they have the time and inclination, they like to volunteer, so those people are gonna show up more. If you want to get the word out to other folks, you're gonna have to do a little bit more. Use your boards to get the word out. If you have a specific community that you have a concern about, you'd like to get them involved, have your boards do it for you. So I can't emphasize enough, use your volunteer boards to do some of the footwork for you. Then the last, my last minute or two here, or half a minute, besides using your boards effectively, the North Plains Employee Handbook, because there are some legal concerns when you're interviewing board members and recruiting board members. It's fine to have questions specifically about the role as defined. Okay, so I've got the employee handbook reference here, so take a look at that, so you don't have civil action for discrimination.
Thank you so much, Larry.
Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question for clarification? I see you brought up, and it's a really good point, about special events.
Yeah.
The Ice Cream Social, I don't think we have a volunteer booth. If you were to have one, would you help set that up and run it?
Yeah, happy to. I know I mentioned volunteer, the volunteer boards whenever I do the welcome packets, because I do a lot of the welcome packets. And I mean, if they're at all, breathing, interested, want to talk, I'll say volunteer boards.
I want to put the opportunity to put you on the spot with that asked.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Oh, any event. So if you have an active volunteer for any event, you want to have a volunteer booth to, get people. I'm great at that, so.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. All right, and we have H&A from Aaron Nichols.
Good evening, Mayor Goodwin, councilors. My name is Aaron Nichols. I want to address you briefly on the memo I sent about the housing needs assessment, the court case around it, and the Oregon Housing Needs Assessment, also called the OHNA. Our group did a thorough analysis of the OHNA as the topics come up here and in the planning commission, and this often seems kind of vague and as a threat of state mandates, and also as a reason to keep the present HNA. The rules for the OHNA are still being finalized, but we were able to speak with the person who sits in on that process. And we read through the final methodology report for the new OHNA rules. What we found is honestly kind of comforting in terms of new mandates, though the city will be required to use state numbers, and these numbers do map almost exactly with this percentage of low, middle, and higher income housing called for in North Plains' current HNA. And though the number of actual dwelling units built would be much lower, it is in line with what the city would find if it did the HNA itself today with current PSU numbers. So there are new laws allowing greater densities, as you all know, but those apply with or without any HNA. And the housing production strategies, which are like the big mandates that I think are a lot of the fear around the OHNA, don't apply to cities under 10,000 residents. That's in the methodology. So while we think a smaller HNA would better suit the city, we don't think it's an urgent step because the OHNA seems to be kind of like a tempest in a teacup for smaller cities. I did want to point out a more concerning issue we ran across when doing this research. At the last council meeting, I mentioned a case between Thousand Friends of Oregon and North Plains involving the HNA, the current HNA. At that point, I didn't actually understand the nature of the case and just pointed out its existence. However, after I spoke with Thousand Friends and when doing research into this, it seems that the city is trying to have the HNA accepted as a standalone document by LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals. Maintaining the HNA as a separate document would create a mandate for UGB expansion, the state mandate. Should the city win at LUBA and have its HNA adopted, it would make an unmet housing need, and that would have to be met through growth. The numbers in the HNA would not simply be grandfathered, but they could force the city's hand in expansion. And should the city lose at LUBA, on the other hand, or if you moved now to dismiss the case, which would save time and funds, of course, the HNA would still wait at the DLCD. You could still use that with a future UGB if you wished, or you could rescind it and replace it with a new HNA based on more recent data. I do think the fact that the city sought the HNA's adoption at LUBA and didn't keep the council informed is problematic. It takes the power of kind of a major policy decision out of the hands of the council and puts it in the hands of lawyers and the courts. It also moves the choice of UGB expansion and the size of an ultimate UGB expansion from a local decision to one that would be forced by the state. Our group thinks a smaller expansion better fits the city. We certainly believe those who ultimately will be most affected by it should be the ones deciding it to the greatest extent under the law. We don't think there's a downside to stopping this lawsuit. You could still use the HNA if you choose. It would be your choice. And, you know, there are two clear upsides, saving thousands in legal fees and you having the choice in how you use that HNA. So you could, if you wanted to instruct your attorney to drop the case by moving for lack of jurisdiction. Wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. And do we have anybody on Zoom? Hands up?
Is anybody raising their hand to make a public comment online?
Yes, yes. Yes, I would like to make a comment, please. Hello?
Yes, absolutely. Linda, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I come before you tonight representing the North Plains chapter of Strong Towns. Yesterday, I attended the public portion of your special meeting of this body, and I'm coming before you tonight to correct the record of a statement the city manager made to all of you. In discussions about the city finances and budget, Mr. Reed said, quote, "I'm not aware we've ever had an audit where we were found deficient on anything," end quote. While he said this, I had on my desk an audit done by the state for fiscal year 2021. It reads in part as follows. Section 2, financial statement findings. Significant deficiencies. Adequate controls were not in place to ensure documented review of manual adjusting journal entries. In addition, adequate controls were not in place to ensure adequate documentation of bank reconciliation process. In Section 3, federal award findings and questioned costs, there was material weaknesses. Adequate controls were not in place to ensure the schedule of expenditures of federal awards and relating long-term debt and grant receivables were accurate at year-end 2020, affecting the beginning balance of 2021. In Section 4, prior financial statement findings, significant deficiencies. Adequate controls were not in place to ensure accounts payable at year-end was accurate. Significant deficiency. Adequate controls were not in place to ensure the correct PERS rates were entered into the payroll system during the fiscal year. There are more, but these illustrate the failure of the city to produce accurate, auditable financial statements going back to 2020. 5 years on, we only have the assurance from the city manager that the 2022 will soon be ready for submission. And still the city has no information on what has been done to correct the deficiencies of 2020 or 2021. The council had no access to the departing accountant employee to learn where our weaknesses are. Instead, we had only Mr. Reed's stated cause for all these deficiencies. Quote, "The finance department has experienced some transitions in personnel and processes," end quote. He made the statement to the state auditors, and it can be found repeated all the way through the report. And yet, he is not aware of any audit where the city was found deficient. The council should think carefully if the city has the right person in this job. A town is only as strong as its weakest link. Thank you.
Very much. Do we have any other public comment from Zoom?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on. Family Justice Center 2024 Annual Report, and I think, Bill, maybe that's something that you're bringing up?
Well, we have some speakers from the Family Justice Center, our partners, and they'll come on up and introduce themselves. We're partners with the County Family Justice Center, and they come and present their annual report every year and give us an update of all the things they're doing. So we'll just turn it over to them.
Hi, good evening. It's nice to see the new counselors. I've seen your pictures, but we just haven't met yet. My name is Judy Willey, and I serve as the president of the Family Justice Center Board of Directors. And I'm going to do this in two ways. I want to just share a little bit of history and knowledge about the Family Justice Center with all of you. And then Rachel, our executive director, is going to walk through the annual report for last year. So thank you very much, Mayor and counselors, for allowing us to come and talk to you. It is, from the very beginning, we had a strong board of directors with the Family Justice Center. We opened our doors in 2018. And for several years prior to that, we were in a planning stage of making it happen in Washington County, Clackamas and the Portland. Yeah.
There isn't one anymore.
Oh, isn't there?
No, it's not Family Justice Center.
Okay, Clackamas. At that time, Multnomah County had one also, but Washington County did not have a Family Justice Center. So all of the survivors that made hard decisions to move out or get away from the abuse had to travel all over Washington County to get those services. And most of the time they gave up because most of them had children and it took days to get to everything. And so that's how we had a police chief move to Hillsborough and become our chief from another state. And there was a Family Justice Center and he said, we need one. And we started down that road. So I'm very proud of being a part of this organization all those years. And we've come so far, so fast, actually, in providing services. The other part of our model is a multidisciplinary collaboration of public and private agencies dedicated to ensuring a coordinated response to family violence. So it's this next year, we will be including child abuse. And today we have 22 partners in our center that's located there. So when an individual needs help, all they do is come to the Family Justice Center. And we even have a restraining order location set up at the center. So they don't have to go to the courthouse to start that process. I just said that includes a courtroom where survivors can obtain restraining orders without ever going to the courthouse. I am proud to say that we have professional leaders serving on the Family Justice Center Board of Directors. And I do want to mention that forgive me, your name, let's go. Danielle, sorry, Danielle. I know it like, I really know it well, I'm sorry. Danielle is on the Family Justice Center Board and serves along with us and is also on our executive committee, so we're really proud of that. So, Washington County includes, some of our board members include the key partners such as Washington County District Attorney, Washington County Sheriff's Office, Washington County Commissioner, a law attorney, a Voices Committee survivor, a physician, and several Washington County business leaders. So we're made up of a very solid group of leaders who take this very seriously. We are excited about the future, what the future holds for us. 2023 and 24 have been very busy years in many ways. We purchased a larger building, which is located in Hillsborough, and at this time is in the remodel stage, and we plan to move to that location in January of 2026. So it used to seem like a long ways away, and all of a sudden it's around the corner. North Plains financial support since 2017 has definitely enabled us to meet survivors and their family needs. The support of Washington County cities has also allowed us to expand our services in the center. And so we've grown a lot, and it is with your city's help and all the other cities' help. And I just want to make sure that you guys know how much we appreciate anything and everything we do to make our mission successful. So now Rachel's got all the really good stuff. So Rachel Schutz is our executive director.
Thank you. I'm gonna go over some of the details of the services that we provided over the last year. And then also share with you what services were provided to residents of North Plains. So this year, like many over the past that I've come and shared, have been a year of even more services provided to even more survivors, and that can seem like a big challenge. I see it as a good thing because I think that we have increased our outreach and we've increased our community conversation around violence and abuse. And so more people who need the services are coming to get those services, as opposed to there are an increasing number of people that need the services. I think we've done a very good job in making sure that that outreach is reaching the people that need it. In fact, we've worked together with North Plains really closely to make sure that people in North Plains are getting the information that they need. And I'll share a little bit about that, but in particular, our cities in rural areas, we've been working hard to make sure that they can get the resources that they need and also the transportation to the center that they need, because frankly, no matter where you put the Family Justice Center, it's going to be far for somebody. And in addition to that, we launched several initiatives that increased the number of people that were being served or the number of people that were coming to the Family Justice Center. The first one, which was relatively young at the start, at the end of 2024, was the work that we did to put in place a countywide risk assessment with our law enforcement and our court partners. So now when every police officer that arrives on the scene of a domestic violence incident in which there's going to be an arrest, there needs to be a risk assessment done with the victim to find out in how much danger are they of lethal or near lethal reassault should they be in contact with this person again. And so that information is then transmitted to our court, our district attorney's office, and our pretrial release folks in the court and parole and probation, in order to make evidence-based decisions on whether and how this person should be supervised in order to reduce homicides in Washington County. Within the first few months of that being active, we saw an 80% reduction in homicides in Washington County, which was great. We were on a very scary upward trend. And so we're proud that that was able to take such a big effect. Another partnership that we launched into was with Oregon Food Bank. And so we've always had a food pantry at the Family Justice Center, a small one. And something that happened when the post-pandemic relief for SNAP assistance ended was more people needed services. More people needed access to food, and we were relying on a network of churches to provide that food, which was an incredible partnership. But unfortunately, the largest church that had been giving us food on a weekly basis ended their food program because they weren't able to keep up with demand. And so we went through the process of becoming a partner with the Oregon Food Bank, and in 2024, we distributed over 22,000 pounds of food, which was unbelievable. I had no idea that that was gonna be such a huge volume of food. We are currently seeing an increase again, and we're distributing about 1,200 pounds of food and are figuring out how we can do 2 pickups per week rather than 1 pickup per week, because the access to food has just become such a huge issue for folks. And then also, we've been able to increase our outreach in general. We have our Voices Committee, which is our Survivor Advisory Board, and with their lived experience, we were able to get a grant so that those folks could reach out into the community and speak from their lived experience and go to the places where they know the information is needed. And so we've been able to increase the number of people that are getting the comprehensive services that they need, even through community connection points. So that's been a huge support. And so overall, what those initiatives have sort of driven into the center is we provided 7,202 survivors with over 11,691 services. And so that's the most that we've ever provided. The thing that I always look for is not necessarily the number of survivors we are serving, but how many services per survivor. Because the idea of the Family Justice Center is we have all of these partners located inside of the center, which should be the case that every survivor that comes is able to access all of the services that they are requesting. And so what I really want to see is how many services per survivor. I want to see that our service numbers are going up faster than our survivor numbers. And so we keep an average count per month on how many services on average do folks get. And we are continuing that upward trajectory, which is great. And so the more service providers we are able to have, the more programs they are able to run, the more services we are able to be in, the more comprehensive of a one-stop shop we're able to be for the community. So some of those numbers I wanted to pull out and share with you in 2 ways. One is just sort of bulk numbers. So I said we distributed 22,843 pounds of food. We were able to serve 1,939 families with clothing, emergency assistance, diapers, etc. We provided childcare for 250 youth or children, and 346 survivors appeared safely for their court cases inside of the courtroom in the Family Justice Center. Judy mentioned that before virtual court was easy to do, after the pandemic, we had a virtual court, which was a really novel idea where survivors could appear not at the courthouse, but in a safe offsite location. And we've continued to build on the amount of court cases that we can hear. So you can make victim impact statements, you can come to your grand juries. And now we're starting to work through the process of having trials where a survivor can appear at the Family Justice Center, have their attorney, have their support people, call their witnesses, all at the Family Justice Center, while the other party meets at the courthouse, which is extremely novel. And we're really excited about that. The thing that I really want to point out is what survivors themselves reported experiencing when they came to the Family Justice Center. So 99% of survivors reported that they experienced trauma-informed care. 100% of survivors reported that they received the help they needed to keep their family safe. 100% of survivors reported that they felt they and their children were cared for while they were in the center. And 89% of survivors reported that after their visit, they can see their path to safety, healing, and hope. And so what survivors themselves report is the most important measure in my estimation. So for North Plains, we have seen, we served 12 residents of North Plains who reported that they were residents. So we have between 30 and 40% of people do not report where they come from. That is something that is totally voluntary, and we see in our smaller communities that people are less likely to report that they're coming from a small community. But 12 survivors from North Plains were provided with 30 services. And that is actually a 71% increase over last year. So we did see we did see less people in 2023. And the last time I came and talked with you guys, we really worked hard in North Plains to get information out. We put information about Family Justice Center on the website. We put information in new residents packets, which was really fantastic, and also in utility bills. And it's clearly made a difference. That really shows that when there's information in the community, sort of in the fabric and the ecosystem of the community where people don't have to ask for it, they don't have to look for it. I personally know that North Plains Police carry Family Justice Center cards wherever they go. Lori's very good at making sure that they do that. People show up with those cards. That happens every day. Survivors come into the front door and they hold out this card and they say, the police officer told me I had to come here, or this is where I'm supposed to come, or I don't remember who talked to me, but this is the thing. We have police officers that bring survivors to the Family Justice Center all the time. And what I really love is seeing the police that are just sort of like sitting on our leather couches with all their gear, like, yeah, I'm just waiting for somebody. I brought somebody here, you know, and we just like, would you like a granola bar kind of a thing, you know, like they're just, I always say that there's nobody in the world that wants to see the end of domestic violence and child abuse more than police officers. Nobody wants to continue going to those scenes. And so the partnership that you guys have had with us in ensuring that survivors can get to the Family Justice Center, no matter where it is outstanding. And clearly with the 71% increase, you guys went hard on making sure that your residents knew about and could get to the Family Justice Center. So I really, really thank you.
For those that don't know, Rachel's husband is an officer in our town.
Officer Schutz, in fact. Yep,
So.
the bald one that keeps getting tattoos.
Is he the one sitting on the couch?
Time to time. He doesn't tell me when he's there. So I just want to thank you. Over the last 4 years, you guys have contributed to the Family Justice Center more than that.
Yeah, since day one.
Since day one, since 2017, but over the last 4 years, you guys have contributed $20,000 to our operations. And as Judy said, that really makes a big difference. That allows us to keep growing year over year over year to ensure that we can provide these services. And now on to the next time I come and speak with you guys, we will be in the Family Peace Center. And I will be talking about all the amazingness for there, but also hopefully you guys will come to our grand opening whenever we end up scheduling that. But thank you very much. And please, if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer. Yes.
So are you tracking, trying to be the right way to put this, returning, I don't want to say customers, but,
Yeah.
are we seeing a trend? I guess I'm asking, is there a trend one way or the other?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there are people that manage the cases of the individuals. And so one thing is it's double-sided. So what we don't want to see necessarily is people coming back over and over and over because bad things keep happening over and over and over. What I do want to see is people coming back over and over and over because they're engaging with their children, with art classes, with support groups, with all those things. I can say from my personal connection with our Voices Committee, those are survivors that have come through the Family Justice Center and are now serving in leadership capacities with the Family Justice Center. And they have stories about, you know, I started with the support group, or I started by getting my restraining order or what have you. And now 4 years on, I'm here and I have a seat on the board of directors or those sorts of things. So yes, there's absolutely families that we see year over year and month over month, and that I love. And there's case managers helping to support folks to make sure that they have the foundation underneath them to ensure that they never have to come back to the
Yes.
Family Justice Center again.
I will just want to echo, you know, I've had the pleasure of both of you coming before our council before and sharing the progress, and I have just seen so much growth, truly at a ground level to what it is now. I will also share, I had the pleasure of serving on grand jury over the summer and saw firsthand the impact, right? I knew about the Family Justice Center, but actually seeing it come to life and from a survivor's perspective, which is really enlightening. And I just want to say thank you for your work in the county, because I know it truly takes a village, and this having everything just under one roof is truly remarkable. So thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you so much. It's really kind.
We have election cycles every 2 years, so oftentimes you have new councils for the cities. We have 5 new members on this city council right now. Is there, I know that you talked about a grand opening, but that's probably a year out. Do you have open houses while still being put together to let people see or elected officials, maybe from like around different areas of Washington County, kind of a walkthrough night or like an open house night to explain what is the blank building and how it's gonna look, if it's safe. I mean, last time I went there, I had a hammer, I was like, I don't know. If it's-
You were, yep. Yeah.
So is it, if it is safe, would that be a good idea, or can we do that?
I think
Open house.
organizing something like that is absolutely something we can do. It is an active construction zone, so you will get to wear a helmet again. And so, but if the council wants to see the new building, or even if they want to come tour the current operations, we would be more than happy to set that up.
Thank you.
I'm throwing out an idea and I don't know if it's appropriate or not based off of training and things like that, but seeing as we're kind of pillars in the community and community members know that they can come to us, would it be helpful
Yeah.
if we had an 8x10 printout of, here's some things we can help with and here's a card and we have those available to hand out?
Yeah, absolutely. I can send those materials, Lori. I'll email you electronic copies of all those things. Yeah. Something that's really helpful we have is a poster that's called Know the Signs, Know the Cycles. And it just sort of explains everything that somebody might be experiencing. And what I've found is if and when people see those things, or if and when somebody's handed those things and the message is sort of, you know, if you were to take a look at these things and if you sort of identified any of the things on here, you know, maybe you might want to talk with somebody about those things. What's really challenging is if somebody's hearing a story from a survivor and, you know, then they're told like, oh, you're a victim of domestic violence. A lot of people will sort of like recoil from that message. So I can give those posters and those handouts to you so that you guys can hear that. The other thing is if the council as a whole or different members of the council want a training on how to respond, if a survivor discloses that they are to you, then we would be happy to provide those things as well.
Our current food bank, may find some value having some of that training. We have a broad cross section of clients that we serve on a weekly basis. The numbers are growing up, they're exceeding 800. We passed that mark this month.
Wow.
But that information might be critical to not only share, but have in hand as we're serving.
I believe we just delivered materials to the food bank, but with 800 people, they're probably out already. We can bring more, and if the staff or volunteers want a training, that would be absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah. Lori, you can pass out my card, like.
Hand it out like
Yes,
candy.
exactly.
Lori, do you have some cards if we were to come and grab some or?
Not right now.
Okay.
I've given them all out.
Hey,
And we put,
71%.
yeah, and when she sends the posters, they go up in all the places we
Yeah.
post our agenda packets, and the library posts them. And
I was gonna say outside at Jesse Mae's.
I've never used that board because the bush grew over it and nobody could see anything, so I'll get with Dustin and see if we can.
Find a new spot, cause that's a great
Yeah,
location
so,
for.
but yeah,
You
whenever.
prefer hard copies or electronic
No,
copies?
you can
that
send
can just
electronic.
print?
and
Okay,
I'll print them out.
I'll send electronic of everything.
Perfect.
You can just print and distribute as you need to.
You got it.
I love that we had this great conversation. We're already workshopping how to get the word out better. And, you know, personally, you have my gratitude and appreciation for the incredible work that you do. It is profoundly important. And I'm so glad that you came and shared with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for the time, everybody. We really appreciate it.
We'll be back next year.
All right, we'll be here.
Thank you.
You're up first with library department.
I had just a couple updates to my report. We had the Bloodworks Northwest Blood Drive today, and they had 10 blood donors today.
She
think
told
one
me
may be
that-
among us.
Yeah, she said, you better show up there, otherwise, I'm gonna be completing, all right, I'll be there.
It's even green.
I know,
Yeah,
theme, right?
and, our library supervisor recruitment closed on Friday, and today I've spent quite a bit of time going through our 26 applications, so that's the most applications I've had for any one job posting, so I'm really pleased with that. And I also just want to thank, I think they've stepped out, but our partners, the Family Justice Center, we do have their cards at the library and make sure we always have a stock there. We really value their partnership within our North Plains community. Does anyone have any questions for me?
No, that, Judy Willie just came back in, if you want to repeat that last
Oh.
sentence.
I just really value our partnership with the Family Justice Center from the library. Thank you for coming.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate that there are reports that you provided, and just in the interest of time, if everybody feels comfortable, I think we'll. Thank you so much, Robin.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. Not much to add to my report. I just wanted to highlight and take any questions you might have, but highlight the onboarding of our volunteer with the North Plains Police Department. So kind of when I came here about a year ago, a little over a year ago, one of my main goals was to try to increase our community engagement and outreach from the police department perspective. And so one way of doing that, several conversations of one of our fantastic residents here in town, Joanna Parra. Oh, is she online?
She is online.
But she's been a fantastic resource for us just here in town on multiple different volunteer opportunities, and expressed an interest in working with the police department and her passion for community outreach and engagement. And so harnessing her energy and good skill set, she's agreed to kind of onboard to the sheriff's office as a volunteer dedicated here to North Plains Police in our efforts to kind of improve and kind of drive forward our community outreach efforts. So really excited about that. Not sure exactly what how it's gonna look going forward. We got some framework to build, and Joanna and I will do that with Bill's help as well, and we'll kind of see what it's gonna look, but we're really excited to have her willing to dedicate her time and her skills and here for us in North Plains. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
I've been trying to push the STARS program. Like STARS are the people that are generally retired. And they volunteer to do code enforcement, or just not only code enforcement, but driving around, because the vehicle is seen to give presence. When I was in California, my father was part of that, and he really enjoyed it. He's retired to give him something to, some kind of like a job to or responsibility. Last time I talked about this a few times, there's a problem with insurance and how you're gonna get that done, and how you put something in harm's way, a bunch of other things. Was that solved at all? And is there a program that since the last 6 years has been aligned?
No, there's not, to my knowledge, any program that kind of fits that bill. We used to have a volunteer program that tended to be kind of a retirement volunteers, people of retirement age volunteering at the sheriff's office that would enforce like disabled vehicle parking enforcement. That program disbanded quite some time ago, and I think a lot of it was a liability and insurance piece. So to my knowledge, there's not a new program. I'm happy to kind of poke around and see if there's something like it.
Especially driving around.
Yeah.
I mean, there was the Kansas City experiment back in '56 where they had cars driving around, and that really brought crime down, and every drove better, you can see the cop right there and all that stuff, right?
There's quite a bit of safety concerns putting unarmed volunteers in any kind of marked vehicle that says anything that police or public safety on it, so probably for good reason they don't do that much anymore, but I'm happy to look and see what kind of options there might be. Great, thanks. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm being entirely facetious here, but effectively sitting with a hairdryer and a lawn chair to try and get people to slow down on North.
Yeah. Is it working? No, just kidding. Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. And I just wanted to also take a chance to say thank you so much to your deputies who helped support that traffic control situation with CenturyLink. And that line that was down, that was obviously in a high traffic area. And you guys handled that beautifully. Thank you so much.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Anything? I think you are perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, council, again. I actually didn't realize that was gonna be a really interesting topic from, about the ASR, so. So I'm glad that we're able to, get that communicated to you all. As far as things that were not on my council report that had happened in the last week, I guess my Friday 5 didn't fully get out there, but I wanted to let you know, what had happened this week. We did have both of our reservoirs cleaned, so we had a contractor come in and basically divers that come in and clean everything out, and they inspected one of our gauges that was kind of off. And then we kind of troubleshooted what was going on there. And so that was one of the things that we were able to do this week with that. Javier was able to coordinate. Normal routine maintenance with our water system, and that includes the flushing. I don't know if you had seen around town that we have kind of an annual flushing program that Javier is really getting into. And that was kind of in conjunction with the reservoir flushing that happened. But this is one of the things that we kind of have to do on a normal basis. And as part of that flushing, that's how we kind of check our valves, we check our hydrants. And it's just kind of normal stuff. See, some other things that we had done, just normal fleet maintenance, some more pothole patching, more beaver dam management, which the beaver season, as far as I can tell right now, is, I think it's over right now. And I am still trying to get in contact with ODOT. I've gotten in contact with most of the individuals in that area of Jewett Cameron. And just trying to get a long-term solution in place for that beaver management. Because they're no longer considered pests, they're a protected animal. And so what we were kind of told by the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife is that we kind of have to live with it. And so we have to find a way to mitigate that. And so that's something that we have to, and it's not necessarily our responsibility. This is one of those things that none of that is city property, yet because no one else is taking care of it, we have come in and actually taken care of it, because that has affected city infrastructure down upstream and downstream. And so that's why it's important to get with all of these, our partners and the private property owners to make sure that gets fixed. And it's not an overnight little process. We still have Swinnerton coming in and fixing a lot of issues with the public, or the new facility. I think this is one of those finding the gremlins stages. We are finally going to get the bug network. Comcast is going to come out and install our fiber line. Yay, we can have some actual dedicated internet instead of going off the T-Mobile hotspot. We were having some issues recently with them because they had upgraded their tower, is what they were kind of conveying. And when they upgraded the tower, it didn't quite connect with our system that we had in place. As far as my technological expertise goes, I'm just gonna leave it at that. It kind of got complicated, but it's fixed now, and I can't wait for the dedicated internet. That's gonna fix some other issues that we have as well. One of the things that we're also doing in conjunction with Robin in the library is that she has an ADA grant improvement, and I've kind of delegated Cody to kind of, hey, project manage this and get some contractors out to help with getting some ADA improvements going on. And so we should see some results there for April. Some upcoming things that are on the water side. We got results from the Joint Water Commission on their side for their consumer confidence report, their annual report. And we will take that information and make that ours. That's something that I've normally been doing, but kind of pushing that off to Javier as he's kind of taking on more and more responsibilities. And eventually get his DRC from TVWD when they pull out here in July. Other than that, we could have a continuing conversation from what I originally presented in about 10 minutes earlier, or if you had any questions on the other part of the report that I submitted.
Beavers. So I'm looking at the House Bill 3464, and it says that landowners now have to get a permit to kill them.
Yes.
How does the city go about that within other landowners? Do you have to go through Cameron Who and say, hey, can you apply for this permit, or how's that?
So we couldn't go out and actually have someone, kind of trap them. We had a volunteer, someone that we didn't even pay for, they actually said, can we trap this individual or the beavers out there? And since it's not city property, they had basically, I had to coordinate with all the private property owners. You must talk with them to get permission in order to get on their land, in order to do all the trapping. And there was also some coordination. They have to report back to the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife about what they have caught. And the last I heard is that there were 3 beavers that were caught, and quite a few like nutrient and some other things. And funny enough, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife said, if you catch a nutria, shoot it on spot. As more of a kind of a quote. Those are the ones that are the nuisance. You don't really have to do much with them, but the beavers are protected. And they kind of have to get their, their numbers and their quotas or whatever from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. So we're kind of in a peculiar spot right there.
Yeah, my question was specifically because it's the landowners that have to do it. How does the city work with it? They just designate these from the landowners?
It should be the landowner responsibility, but because there's just kind of conflict of interest, even Clean Water Services maintains that pond up there. They're kind of in that area where they don't want to maintain that because they say it's far enough off of their property. And so it just kind of turns into a turf war more than anything. And just because no one wants to do it, I'm stepping in and kind of mediating it more than anything, if that makes any sense.
That sounds like a lot of work, not necessarily a issue to crack right now, but if there are ways that we can support you, or if this needs like a public meeting or, a way to get people together in the room so that you're not making 40 phone calls or whatever it is, please let us know how we can help.
Right now, it's more of a communication issue, is that it's not an overnight fix. And the kind of word from ODFW is that we have to learn how to mitigate and live with the beavers. And that is kind of something with the new land use, and it's not going to be an easy fix solution.
And I wouldn't imagine that we're the only town that's dealing with this either. So hopefully there are some lessons learned and some strategies that are being developed in a broader sense.
We did have a presentation last year or the year before about beavers, and basically that's exactly what the solution that we were told that we need to kind of follow is, kind of
ask around.
What was no. They're kind of like making the wildlife habitable for the beavers, like making it like how to live with them. And so that is kind of a costly endeavor in itself.
Yeah, definitely some more conversation
Yes.
later. Does any of the council, and you let me know if this is an appropriate time in what you want to share with us, but do we want to talk a little bit about the handout we were reviewing earlier that we didn't give that in quite enough? We have a few minutes.
I think there's a lot to unpack here. Personally, and I would love to entertain the idea of a true dedicated work session for Dustin to get everything out instead of a condensed 10 or 15 minutes, but I also defer to maybe if there's anything time sensitive Dustin needs to share.
So you tell me. I'm happy to give you the 5 or 10 and let you run through. I think it's probably a better use of our time rather than me asking a bunch of questions that I can pester you about later.
Well, a lot of these are kind of, I wouldn't say wish list items, but these are things that would help the department run a little bit better. And I can budget these into the next biennial budget. but they're not necessarily things that we must have, but they will definitely help, and they will also help with the lower staff that I think we're kind of trying to achieve and being more efficient. And so if we have the technology to be able to do, some of this, that will help. And so that there's that aspect of that. Some of these things are, I just kind of want to reiterate, getting another individual to help Javier out with the water distribution system. That is something that I will come up with a resolution here pretty soon and a funding mechanism for that, because I think we still have a little bit left that we can move around a little bit, but I'm pretty sure we're gonna have to do a supplemental budget. I know we've got plenty more funds in other areas and other funds, but they're kind of reserved for capital projects and SBC. Like we can't use that for this particular item. And so that's kind of what makes it a little bit more complicated. But I'll try to get that out to you as soon as possible, because in order to get a really good qualified person, I've been having probably even just getting a seasonal worker is kind of difficult. We're in a place where it definitely pays better at Hillsborough, TVWD. We had a seasonal that works for Hillsborough now. He worked for TVWD and then he went to Hillsborough. So he's kind of moving on up. So it's like, I want to be able to keep and retain those kind of individuals, but I don't have a lot in my back pocket. And so that was some of the other things that I was looking in here is, well, how can we think outside of the box if we can't pay them a higher salary per se? Maybe up our training budget, give some type of, allow certain individuals to take home their utility truck. Especially like only when they're on call, not like every night, but in lieu of them, having that on-call fee and then having a 2-hour call out minimum. And so just kind of trying to think outside of the box and make it a better workplace, kind of diversify the workload in a way that not everybody is swamped all the time. And I think that was one of the bigger complaints is that our workload is pretty strenuous. And with TVWD pulling out, that's going to make things that much more complicated.
I appreciate you bringing some really amazing information. Gave me a lot to consider, and I will pester you later. Thank you so much.
All right.
Sorry, I just had one quick question. I know we have talked previous council, this council, Parks Board about landscape maintenance, contracting that out potentially to be more cost effective.
Yes.
And I know previously we had discussed and even voted as a council for potential fee in the water bill. My question is the $120,000 that would be needed for landscape crew. Is that going to be in the proposed budget that we'll see here soon, or are we still going to need to think how to source those funds?
So I tried to word that in a way. One of the things I had in my presentation is I actually have a GIS map of all 74 areas that we had, and just kind of show you, some of the places. There's a lot of places that we don't need to maintain, but it's going to take me a while to actually basically stop doing this. And so if we stop maintaining some of those areas, it's not going to cost $120,000. And that's something that I try to convey in here. And definitely with a contractor coming in to do some of those areas, it's going to be about the same whether I hire 2 new people. There'd be very kind of the level 1 type of person or even 1 full-time person and a seasonal to be able to do that. But we have enough work year round landscape wise, and it's not all parks and it's not all buildings. And so if we have like a parks maintenance fee, that's kind of a misrepresentation of all of the areas, because we only have maybe I think about 10 or more acres of actual park space that belong to the city. The rest of it is just either kind of public around City Hall or whatever, but it can't really have necessarily a parks maintenance fee. It doesn't really go towards everything else that's not parks, because we have a lot of maintenance, water quality facilities, right away. that is beyond all that. I mean, we can probably change the name and just say landscape, grounds and landscape and facility. There's a lot of different ways that we can kind of mold that, but eventually it might come to a point where we need to have a fee to be able to support and fund at least the maintenance that we need.
I'd like to suggest we put a pin in this and have a true work session where we can dig in and ask these questions to get better efficiencies and figure stuff out and come into a consensus of how we want to move. I think you need more time.
This is complicated, but Tricia, you seem like,
Just, and I agree. I guess my question was, are we going to see a line item in the proposed budget for the maintenance that's needed or landscape maintenance or
So,
not?
that was one of the things I was discussing with Bill, is actually have a new fund dedicated to facilities and grounds. And within that, instead of, because right now among all, I think there's 5 or 6 different funds that it's spread out. So whenever I get the invoice from Showplace, there's about 5 or 6 different funds that I have to kind of coordinate and, figure out where they go to. And if I just have one fund that they're in there, that will kind of simplify things. And so that's one of the ideas with the budget. When Bill and Andy did the budget, before I came on board, we didn't have a public works director, so they did the best that they could with what they had. And so I'm kind of running off of, something that kind of passed the time. And so this is the time for actually clear up some of those areas. There's a lot of places where maybe we're capital heavy when we should have been more operations heavy. There's certain line items in there. It's like, well, we don't need that much money in this, but we need it over here. And then, so it's like kind of trying to find, where do they actually go? And I'm trying to simplify everything, and maybe I need to condense certain funds. And that's something I'm working on with Bill as well, is to make it more simple in the long run. So it's not as complicated.
and it sounds like that simplicity would also enable some additional agility too. Yeah. Okay. All right, for real this time.
Thank you.
Steve, thank you so much.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Steve Miller, North Plains Planning Manager. One thing I'd like to highlight from this month's staff report is the fact that we have now received all of the building permits for the lots within the Wren Hill subdivision. So that is quite the milestone. We just received the last building permits for phase 5 last week. And we also received the building permit for the multifamily project there last week as well. So that's quite a milestone. The other thing I would like to bring to your attention, I believe it showed up in your Friday 5, is we are working on a buildable lands inventory map to highlight what is currently available inside the city limits right now. So you might look for that coming your way sometime in the next couple of weeks. We'll probably have something finalized. But other than that, I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, I think you did a great job with your report, but there are no questions.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
All right, and Steve, unless you have other content, I think we have Brian from 3J in the room.
Yes.
All right, great. Floor is yours.
Yeah. Good evening, guys. Brian Feeney with 3J, so I gave you guys a summary report. I'm glad to be able to get here in person this time. Wasn't sick or absent, so nice to meet you guys all face to face. Nothing new to report since I gave the update last Thursday. So I'm welcome to any questions you guys may have or that may have been lingering from a previous meeting.
I think that also means that you wrote a very clear and well thought out report that we were able to review online in our packet. I'm really glad that you came, but I wish we had more to discuss with you.
It's always good to listen in and hear all the reports, so glad I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and finally, finance.
Finance. Thank you, Mayor. Well, I mean, between the Friday 5 information you got, there isn't really anything new to report. For the monthly finance report, before you, basically for everything happening the biennium through the end of February. I think, for the most part, I think the story is consistently the general fund, our operating funds here, all of them. Well, Jessie Mays, continues to have its issues between being an affordable rental opportunity for the community versus the cost to keep it. That's constantly something that comes with Jessie Mays and the facility that we have, but otherwise kind of our regular operating funds here are operating within budget and so far so good. We don't expect any major anticipated expenditures moving forward, through January 30th. We should, June 30th, back and forth between calendar and fiscal year, but nothing major unanticipated through June 30th, end of fiscal year and end of this biennium. So any questions at all, happy to answer.
I have questions.
Mm-hmm.
We spent a lot of time yesterday kind of flirting with budget. And then we had did some visioning exercises too, and I'm trying to visualize how this stuff comes together new year. And I was wondering how we can incorporate mechanisms into the budget process to ensure alignment with the council before approval. So some of the things that I was thinking of potentially that could work, though, some limited action and solution.
Sure.
Summary, is there a possibility to request a summary of vision work for council adoption? And if so, when could we do that? Before sending the vision work off to the budget committee, is there a way to show how it transitions from current to future spending buckets as we're kind of thinking about how things could evolve over time, current state, future state? I'm wondering if we could, if there's any ways or mechanisms to provide process visibility through baking in status updates at each council meetings or Friday fives too. That's been a winner. And then before final budget sign off, will there be a mechanism or milestone to like a working session to review the final roll up and sufficient time to allocate any potential win shifts that may be needed?
Okay, lots of good questions. First off, I guess, for everybody who is in the room or listening in, we had basically a city council visioning session and city leadership staff, team staff involvement yesterday. And so we talked about a lot of, our council kind of came together with a bunch of different priorities that are going to be turned into kind of formal new vision, and particularly 5 new pillars to kind of guide things like budget process and other actions and policy discussions and moving forward. So regarding the budget process, so tomorrow I'll be visiting with Steve, who did our visioning process just yesterday. And to kind of come up with a plan this week on how to kind of formalize some of the information into those pillars. I was going to, during the city council, the city manager report, kind of talk about what next steps are going to be. I think what it's looking like is April 7th, we'll have a formal session during the city council meeting to kind of talk about, okay, the nexus between the pillars you all identified and then the budget priorities that we'll move forward with in order to kind of put numbers on the page for ultimately what the budget document will be by fund and department and what have you. So that's actually kind of a conversation that we'll hammer out basically with you all on the 7th. So what I can say is during the council report, city manager report, we'll kind of work on agenda item and schedule. Now, speaking of schedule, we'll talk about that too. I did send out an email to you all today that kind of had the planned budget process. And the high elevation picture of that is basically, through the conversation that you all have, really starting on April 7th, kind of that nexus between the pillars that you identified and will be formalized, and then what, budget priorities that kind of come from that. On the 7th, you'll kind of, as a group, as council, talk about your priorities, and then we'll take that into department department heads, directors. And then with me, we'll go through and kind of turn that into, the budget for whatever, new programmatic priorities or what have you. So that process really kind of will be formally kicked off. We're taking that for after the 7th and then kind of turning that into numbers more formally. We have been working on kind of coming up with an idea of a budget by department and fund of how to maintain existing levels of service, not, kicking it up with more staff or with more patrol time or what have you, but just what's it going to take to, working on what's going to take to maintain our existing levels of service. And then given, what new priorities might be for maybe adding more patrol time or maybe, pursuing some programs in the Parks and Rec department. If those are priorities, then we'll, then we can we have a kind of a starting point to kind of move in those directions with. But anyway, so, I don't know if now's the best time or if you want me to wait until the city manager report, but I can kind of walk through that schedule that we have. But generally speaking, we kind of, we take what the priorities you've identified, and then, we take what we have, what resources we know we'll be projecting over the planning time period, and then kind of figure out, when we can phase different things in based on what new priorities are. And then, trying to maintain existing levels of service that are appropriate as well. And come to you all, basically budget committee. The process is we come to budget committee with the budget, and you all hear it and ask questions with other residents who are at large members of the committee. And then we work with you all budget committee, fine tuning what you hear, following up on questions, revising. Budget committee hears all that, decides ultimately to approve the budget with whatever revisions are needed. And then that approved budget, we have a proposed budget committee reviews and tweaks and approves what they like. And that gets sent on to council for a hearing, an adoption process in June. And so we have to have that budget adopted before July 1st. And then a few other resolutions that have to be adopted as well to, what's the property tax levy rate? How much of the permanent levy rate are you going to adopt as the levy rate for the following year? We have a very small levy rate relative to other cities. So I don't know that the city's ever adopted less than the $2.17 tax rate that we do have the ability to levy on property. And then we have a few other kind of formal resolutions that council needs to pass in order to get revenue from the state shared revenues on a population basis. So Councilor Fage and Councilor Pavin kind of did this because it's not a very exciting process, but they nodded. So that's all kind of the process at a glance.
Thanks.
And when we do this, you'll see why we want the two-year budget.
Just looking at the faces.
Yeah.
So just to make sure I'm absolutely clear on this, I appreciate you kind of drawing the process out for us, and it sounds like, that's an established way of working, and that makes sense. Given that we have such a high percentage of council that is new this time, and that's unusual, and we just had this really great visioning session, I think it might behoove us to put an extra check and balance in to make sure that we don't, just because this is so time sensitive, get all the way into June, realize that adjustments need to be made and not have the runway to do that. So are there better ways that we can kind of be checking in and giving council visibility along the process, so that if something at that point that's probably minor needs to be adjusted, we have the flexibility and the good communication to make that a smooth process rather than a rush at the end?
Well, I wouldn't characterize it a rush at the end. I mean, this is pretty close to the process that this is kind of the typical process. We are starting a little bit later with budget committee meetings in the schedule that we do have. Simply because we are short-staffed basically, so that just adds to you know, catching up with this and that and the other on top of that, doing the budget process. So, you know, I think if council wants to discuss taking a look at how to, you know, get the budget committee, if you all want to get the budget committee in earlier or what have you, I mean, really the next step is that we're working towards is with the full budget committee, including you all. And so, you know, there's some element of you as a budget committee kind of needing to discuss that too. So that's for you all to discuss how you want to, you know, set up the process or work on the process, and you might want to get the budget committee folks involved too. But you know, there's an element of we need to get the job, we need to get the work done, additional checks. You know, we can work on that to see how it works well, but there's an element of just getting it done for you and adding the time and different check-ins when really we have all this work to get it done. We want to balance to make sure that we're getting things to you, and we're already kind of under the gun with short staff. So I just want to make sure we don't do anything that thinking we're doing a positive thing to help delays or causes potential for delay. So we just want to balance that.
Yeah, absolutely want to find the balance, but I want to, again, just out of that effort to be clear that I think I, at least as a member of council, am asking that we have follow-up agenda items, to have touch points on this, to, you know, get document copies as we're continuing to develop it, just so that we have a wealth of visibility and everybody feels extra comfortable. So without adding a ton more work, just sharing the good stuff that you're doing, so that we can all feel comfortable and confident along the way. And I don't know, we've got 6 of us sitting here. Anybody else feeling the same?
I think a good ask of us would be, can we pull it in a month? Can we get the budget set a month earlier than we need? Maybe that could give us enough time.
A month earlier,
We could do
the
it.
answer is no.
Okay, then striking that balance, I think maybe it's that communication piece. Then if we don't have the timeline, then the communication.
Or start working on it or
compensate for
something to
that.
get, you know.
Well, no, you had your hand raised?
I was gonna say something back to me.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, just having served on the budget committee since before I was on council, I mean, maybe 2014, 15. It's a very dry process.
Oh,
I mean, you're gonna need all the caffeine in the world. And I absolutely hear the concern and the reserve about wanting, you know, dot all I's, cross the T's. But I will say in years past, and I'm gonna expect no less this year from Bill and staff, that the budget is very comprehensive and we go through line by line in, you know, an hour or an hour and a half worth of a presentation. And there's checkpoints at each point, like, okay, any questions before we move on to this next budget item? And I don't want to put words in Bill's mouth, but I will say that if we are following that same process this year, it feels very comprehensive to the point of almost a little too comprehensive at times. And I mean that in all the best ways. So I would just share, I hear, you know, staff sentiment of there's a ton going on, and the budget, you know, as we can all imagine, is a big lift. But I also hear council's expression of, hey, like, let's pump the brakes. So I think, you know,
We want to know what we're signing off on.
oh, absolutely. And I will just share, you know, raise your hand if at this group, if you've ever attended a budget meeting on budget committee. Have you attended, right? Counselor Phage, is it pretty comprehensive?
It's a lot.
So I think what I'm looking for,
It's not complex at all.
Okay.
It's laid out nicely.
I think what I'm looking for, particularly given what we worked on yesterday, is that line by line kind of granularity of, all right, which pillar is this aligned to? Did this go up, down, or stay neutral based on the difference in priorities to what we had in the last biennium? Because I think we have largely been rolling budgets forward on roughly the same structure and roughly the same priorities for a while. And so understanding that, hey, you know, this strategic direction that council has very carefully provided in these 5 pillars and all of the subheadings therein, that had an impact then we can tell our constituents that, yes, we have directed our taxpayer dollars, mine too, that it is aligned. When we're spending $120,000 on park maintenance, it's aligned to this value that we've identified, this strategy that we've identified. And here are the cost savings that we had for you because these 6 went down based on these priorities. And here's where we spent more based on this. And that's, I think, what I'm trying to get comfortable with, that we've had enough time to do what is really a very different exercise of relating dollars and cents, which is a fun accounting exercise and very dry and requires caffeine, to why we're all trying to spend that money, which is because we care about our community and we're trying to get some great stuff done. So that's kind of what I would love to illustrate as part of this process and make sure that we have strong confidence in, so that when we unanimously, gosh, I hope, pass this budget, that we all feel fantastic about it and that we're looking forward to the value and the benefit that this is going to demonstrate for our community.
Absolutely. And I 1000% agree with you, right? Like we all, as we talked about during yesterday's exercise, we all want to be good stewards, right? And I think as we go through this process, I think and I don't want to assume, but I think it's going to be eye-opening to see what a shoestring budget we are working on as a city, and to be able to tell our constituents what we are working with, and here's why we were not able to deliver on this priority because of XYZ funding deficit, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the part of, I just want to encourage this council to trust the process in that way. And again, Bill, I have no doubt you're gonna lead a wonderful presentation along with staff, but I think there's not a lot of wiggle room. And I don't know about this year, but in years past, there has not been a lot of wiggle room. And it is literally, and Robin and Chief Jones, I'm gonna put you on the spot here, but it is literally like, do I wanna be able to put my head on my pillow at night and be able to sleep knowing that I have police coverage until a certain amount of time? Or do I want to fund the library? And it's those type of hard decisions. There's not a lot of wiggle room that I've seen in years past in my experience with the budget committee, even before council.
Ashley, are you still, you had your hand up and down, are you still on there?
I am. So Ashley Driscoll, City Attorney's Office. I've been following this conversation, and my 2 cents that I'd like to add is that the city needs to make sure that it follows its process. So I'm not 100% clear about what the suggestion is to the change to the city council's role in the process, but I would be cognizant that the process is dictated by state law, and the council has a role in that process. And I would have some concerns about the council inserting itself earlier into the process and what that would look like in practice. So I just wanted to, throw that out to make sure the council was aware. Thank you.
Do you have any concerns about communication and visibility?
So I'm not exactly sure, what you mean by communication and visibility. I mean, the budget committee meets in public. And so, the documents that are available to the public, the budget committee are available to any member of the public. And those meetings also will be available to any member of the public. So Mayor, I guess my question for you is what do you mean by that? Like, what role do you think that the council should have earlier in the process?
I would love for us to, like I was saying a minute ago, have greater visibility as these pillars and visions and strategies are applied to the dollars and cents of particular budget line items of, like we said, can you say that these 5 line items are aligned to this pillar, and this one went up because it's a priority, and this one went down because we have identified that that is no longer a priority. That kind of understanding that the council's wishes and the council's voice has been applied to the dollars and cents in what is a very new way. And that's why having some, a little more of a viewpoint into the process that as the city is carrying it out, to make sure that that vision hits those line items. Because I know that's and it's a short, rushed process.
So the city council will have its role in the process. So the city council will receive the proposed budget from the budget committee, and then the city council will have an opportunity to, make changes to that budget if they feel necessary or enact it. So that's, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is how North Plains does it. That's when the city council, that's the role the city council plays in this process. And I would just be cognizant of the role of the budget committee in, submitting a proposed budget to the city council. And that is, again, a role that's dictated by state law. So Bill, would you agree with that? Do you have anything to add to, the city council's role in this process?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Ashley. I mean, the budget, as it's prepared and gets presented, it gets presented to the budget committee. And the budget committee is deliberately set up of all city council members as well as a number of at-large residents. And so preparing the budget and presenting the budget, it's to that body. And then that broader body with the at-large members just representing just residents. Then that's the body that works on massaging, changing the budget, checking to make sure it reflects what the new pillars are, what the new priorities are. And then, that body is the one that decides, okay, this is what we want. This is what we want to send to council for formal adoption. Of course, with council as members of that. But it's really, I and staff are really working on a budget that we bring to the budget committee. And again, we notice it in we notice it in the news. We can give you updates on where we are at city council meetings, but we have to notice this. The budget committee meetings, we notice it in the newspaper. We get the word out about it. Folks can show up. We make it available. People can comment on it. People can register their comments, concerns, whatever, to the budget committee and to me, and we work through that. But the budget committee is really where, and every city is this way. I mean, there's a budget committee that works through this, that's elected officials and not elected officials. Because that's kind of the way the system's set up to get kind of all of that broader input, not just elected officials, working from their perspective, but just citizens at large. And then what they work on and recommend for adoption is really kind of the result of that process. But it's all noticed. It's all, we go through the process that we have to go through by state law. So I don't, there are a series of weeks where we have to work through all of the different accounts and different funds. And you heard Dustin talk about the fact that we're going to take maintenance and we're going to turn that into its own fund. So we have to pull different things that have been out of other funds, move that into a new fund and present all of that information and project what it needs and resources and so on and so forth. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And so I don't mean to be rude or difficult when I say I can't do it a month sooner. It's just a fact. You know what I mean?
That's understandable.
So just after what Bill and Ashley said, this is set out in the state statute. I mean, if we could pull it, if there was time to pull it for it, that'd be awesome, but clearly there's not. But this is the way this has to happen is all set out in the ORS and the Oregon Administrative Rules. And Department of Revenue doesn't give any flexibility on any of this. They were pretty clear that you either do it this way or else.
That part is perfectly understandable. I think what I'm asking, maybe in a different direction, just restating it and seeing if we can find some common ground here, is that as you're having those conversations with department heads and talking about ways of making the budget more efficient, consolidating funds, all of that work that kind of happens back at the city staff level. That's where I'm wondering whether some of those conversations about the pillars and whether, hey, the thing that we were doing 6 months ago still makes sense now. Those kind of conversations would be happening at that point rather than at budget committee. Because it would be great if we weren't bringing things that weren't aligned that far forward in the process. Does that make sense?
It does, and in the process, we have scheduled meeting with the budget committee to kind of go over what the new goals are, how we're putting them into the budget. you know, kind of go over how we budget, all of that. So that's the first meeting before the budget's released. And so, you know, that's factored into the schedule. So I don't know what else to say other than it's a ton of work and we follow the rules and I think what it boils down to is, you know, when you see what we do, you know, I think our department directors understand that you want to see new priorities and different things. But you know, a budget is one of the few things that on an annual or biannual basis, you know, you all have to go through a very legal rigorous process. And part of the reason why you have a budget committee that includes residents in addition to elected officials is the budget needs to reflect the leadership of city council, but it's a budget for all of the taxpayers' money, whether they voted for the current elected officials or not. And so the state has a prescriptive process we have to go through. And I hesitate to encourage a bunch of check-ins, a bunch of explanations. I think there's an element of we have to have an element of trust that we'll do what's needed. And we will, and I'm happy to kind of talk about on a regular basis at council, you know, what's going on and what we're talking about if it helps. But we do have a process we have to go through as staff to assure also that a proper legal budget is being done too.
Okay, and I certainly want you to follow all of that. I guess what I'm asking for is some conversation along the way. Let me let you off the hook, and I want to get back to us.
Ashley.
Okay.
Ashley, go
Just
ahead.
I think you need to go ahead and drop, right?
I think I have until 9 o'clock, and you know, since we're moving on, I can just hold my comment.
Okay.
No problem.
Yeah. The last thing I was going to say to you is just thank you so much for spending the time for explaining this to us.
Yeah.
Would you expect, based on the conversations that we had yesterday and what you've heard from council on what the priorities are, would you expect that the budget is going to have any significant changes from the previous biennium?
Well, I mean, considering we don't even have the pillars in place yet, formally, we got all the input and Steve's working on that. And we'll be talking about it. I don't anticipate gigantic changes. I mean, I want to be clear. I mean, we're looking at probably 4%, you know, to be on the conservative side of things. We're looking at probably 4% revenue growth each year for the next 2 years. And if folks didn't tune in to the meeting yesterday, the retreat yesterday, you know, as I'm working through, you know, trying to figure out a reasonable but conservative revenue forecast for all the different revenues we have, the community's at an inflection point. Steve, our planner earlier mentioned that Bryn Hill neighborhood, Bryn Hill, has submitted all of their final building permit applications for final build out. We were expecting that project to build over a 5-year period. It ended up being a little over 3. So we're at an inflection point for this community and this city and its finances, because we are looking at next year, there being no more growth in the city. And so we have to budget for more conservative revenue growth, because we aren't having more houses being built after this last 50 homes. And then in addition to that, we kind of enter the Measure 50 property tax revenue trap, whereby we have to budget on if you don't have any growth, property tax every year can go up by 3% at most, but good luck keeping costs at 3% when you have 50% tariffs presented on this and supply chain disruption because of that. The city is entering the Measure 50 game with no more homes being built. So the bottom line is we're looking probably at banking on 4% annual revenue growth. That's not a ton. It reflects a little bit of actual growth, and then the 3%, you know, kind of that we're allowed to have under our property tax law. So we're not looking at major new big things. It's just a matter of figuring out where priorities are and moving things around in a way that's sustainable, but provides new things that you all want to see. So that's kind of where we are on things.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, let's go ahead and take 5. Thank you so much. We have our item of unfinished business, and Bill, I'm deferring to you here because this is just scheduling.
This is just scheduling. Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so just kind of, we just wanted to get this on here because, at a previous meeting, we had a joint work session between City Council, the Planning Commission, and the UGB Relook Committee. And that process, that presentation was a lot of information. And some questions came out of it, as well as I heard from the Planning Commission, actually, they discussed this last week, and I heard from them last week, and I heard from them that they would like to meet with you all again because they had questions they didn't get to because there was just a lot of info. And so they would like to work with you on scheduling when is possible, a work session to kind of ask their questions, get more information. And then there was just the issue also from that work session. We had a lot of questions about the city has a housing needs analysis it's adopted. It's under the old regime system, whatever you want to call it, how a city would take a Portland State University forecast of population and figure out what its housing need is based on that. But since January 1 of this year, the state now has the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis System. And rulemaking for that system is still underway. And so there are ambiguities about what the rules formally will be if the city wants to do a new housing needs analysis under the new system versus stick with what they have. And it's not clear of what's going to be required, if anything, of a city under 10,000 in population. I mean, there's just a bunch of questions, unknowns, and getting some answers, at least best available information directly from the state, from DLCD. What we heard at that meeting from city councilors and planning commissioners and the UGB Relook Committee from their own meeting is that they would just direct questions and answers from the state, kind of give us some info here. Because what we do know is that the city's housing needs analysis that it has adopted, it has 2 years to act or not act, basically. Like, it's good for 2 years, and then after 2 years' time, the city kind of is looking at having to do things under the new system. And so there's questions of, well, what if we don't want to, grow the way the housing needs analysis we have says we should add the housing? Well, there are legitimate questions. Well, if we get rid of that, what if we want to pursue but if we pull the housing needs analysis, that means the ability, the plan for parks gets pulled too, because that's with the housing needs analysis. Well, what if we want to do something different and do parks with it? What does that mean in terms of what system and yada, yada, yada. So it's just a lot of questions, and you all, it really would be good if you kind of heard straight from the state. We had comments tonight, people looking at the issue on their own and exploring what that means and doesn't mean. But I just really think that point blank asking questions of DLCD staff would be a good idea for you all, and just get to know, because they're partners.
So is the proposal to bring a representative from DLCD into a work session?
At least one, absolutely. At least probably 2, maybe more. So.
Can we try to schedule Commissioner
Labonte?
Yep, sorry, yeah, because she had a whole lot of stuff when I was at Planning Commission that I tried to write down, but I can't articulate it correctly.
It's okay, yeah.
Yeah, she had a lot of good questions that then I went and talked to her afterwards. I think council needs to hear that because it helped me understand.
Yeah, they want to meet with, planning
Yeah.
commission wants to meet with.
If we can make sure she's available, I mean, everybody, but she just had a lot of specific things that were super critical to what.
Yeah, I mean, one thing to know is, I mean, it's a massive issue and there's so many different aspects of it. But ordinarily when you have just so you know, ordinarily when you have a joint work session, like say with the planning commission, I mean, usually it's the city manager that runs the meeting, and then you all kind of have a dialogue about the information. But there was just so much info and a lot of questions, there just never came that discussion. And I think your comment about Heather, about Commissioner Labonte's questions, reflects that conversation is an important part of it too, and we just didn't get there. So I think it's a legitimate, thing to schedule and have that conversation, and then just have DLCD either here or on Zoom.
If I could, yeah.
Yeah.
So we've had a lot of meetings and we're all asking questions back and forth and people suspect things and they say something and nobody knows what they're talking about. So we're all this, we had 4 hours of meetings of just like conjunction. Who cares, right? What are we saying? So I think you need to have more of a guided one. Where somebody's explaining something to us. And then us asking questions and people spitballing, and I heard from some other guy, and this guy said this, and what about, none of that. If we could just get something that's more of an educational system of it, and then a lot of our questions will be answered, and we could save a whole lot of time. Because we're running the attorney's time a lot, and getting nowhere done with this, right? We're using human beings' time a lot. If we could just get more of a educational.
Yeah, I wonder if we could bundle up city council's questions, planning commission's questions, RIC questions. If we each get 5.
Those questions may beget more questions. Maybe we have an educational one where we
Well,
have.
where I'm going with this is if we could provide DLCD with these folks who are gonna come and provide this, this session for us with, hey, here are the things that city council was wondering, here's what RSC was wondering, here's what planning commission was wondering. First of all, it may be the same 5 things, but that would give them some topics for that educational piece. And then I think that might reduce the number of questions and dialogue that's needed after that. A little bit of info gathering on the front end to make sure it's the right topics.
Some steering is gonna be really great, I think. We should have that. However, I don't want to just answer those questions. I want to make sure that we understand that they want to give a whole comprehensive
for sure
understanding. Because otherwise, what about this now? That we asked us 17 questions, but now here's number 18. Or 18A.
So I like the hybrid approach.
Can I just clarify what you were asking? So who were you thinking would facilitate this? I think I understand, but I just want to make sure.
The facilitator will be Bill, because he's the one that has the common ground between all of us.
Who's giving the education? Sorry.
Be the state.
Okay, thanks. That's what I thought. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure on the ONA, the OHNA, the new system, they have a nice dog and pony show they'll do for us, that they show to other communities. We go through all that, and then whether we've regathered your questions or whether they're just kind of, they pop up. Then we shoot the questions at them specific to the North Plains, situation. But we hear from the horse's mouth, so to speak. I mean, they're the ones that we have to meet approval for anything we want to try to do or change or whatever.
Seems helpful.
And that would be for the city council and planning commission joint.
Sounds like
thanks.
That seems helpful.
This seems like it's more than an hour. Are you talking about another effectively offsite?
4 hours.
I would rather it not be.
I'm just trying to be realistic, considering we did this once before and are now talking about how much there is left over.
Mayor, I guess what I would say is we have some time. I mean, you all have some we have a work session schedule that's kind of booked out a little bit. I think the soonest work session bit on the calendar that is not occupied, the soonest one is May 5th. So either way, what it would boil down to is we reach out, staff will reach out to DLCD and kind of formally describe the situation and say, here's what they would like to accomplish with the meeting. Here's some things specific to North Plains for our situation. They're very aware of our situation. And then we let us know, can this be done reasonably in an hour? Should we schedule an hour and a half? Is this something where maybe one where they just come in and give a presentation and they hear your questions and then they come back a later time? I'll see kind of what works best, because there are other communities who are just sort of like, what is this? And it's kind of changed how they've had to think about planning as well, because the big difference, and I think the big thing that you all are going to want to zero in on here, is that the new system does have income segments in terms of when you think about your population growing and the housing need you need to provide. The new system, however they require cities under 10,000 to do it. Again, rulemaking isn't done yet. But what we don't know, what we do know is that the new system has income levels that are part of housing needs consideration. And the system that we have, that we went through and we adopted under, doesn't have that. It's not clear that the city under 10,000 population will have to abide by figuring out housing need by income level, but we might have to. But it's something that's very different potentially about what we have versus what we might consider doing differently. And they really need to try to give us good answers. It's just super important.
Okay, and I'll just signal my opinion that I think I would rather that we allocate an appropriate amount of time for this, and if it needs to be on a different evening and we coordinate that with our volunteer constituents, I would prefer to do that, and I think we have an awful lot of work sessions that are attached to city council meetings coming up, and some high priority things, communications plan, et cetera, that are gonna need to get slotted in there too. So let's give this the time that we feel like it deserves. If we're getting everybody together in the room, let's only do it once.
If I can just also point out, we're gonna have a lot of, or we're gonna have for very long budget meetings, and so I'd like to be cognizant of that, because the budget is statutory. This is a, it's called a ideal, but the budget, we have to do that. That's not
And
optional. So,
perhaps this is less time sensitive in the budget.
well, I guess that's what I'm asking.
I mean, I think, yes, I think I guess there are two things. So the planning commission's interest in hearing more and asking more questions and talking with you about things, I think that there's a sense of from them of urgency to do that because they just didn't get the opportunity. But rulemaking is not done. It's not going to be done for a little bit. So it's not like there's solid information you all will hear and will need to act on anything. Like that's not, there's time regarding how this city council is going to determine what it wants to do in the future. But it is true that planning commission, feels like they didn't get to ask questions and didn't get to kind of talk. And I think that that's a part of it. So
Well,
if you
that's
want to break it
absolutely
up into
something, maybe let's break that up and let's address that with the appropriate urgency, and whether that's by coming here or some subset of us going there.
Well, yeah, it could be.
I want to be
work
responsive to that.
session Before one of their meeting, they've done an hour and a half before.
Yeah, we can.
One of their meetings before, or.
We can figure it out, but what I don't want to, but I do generally want to agree with Councilor Dumbro, that's budget has to be done. And there is no pending decision by council on housing needs analysis, usually like not at all. And so, yeah.
I think my suggestion would be whichever direction we go, we might need to split this up. I think this is important because we also want to make sure that planning commission is being heard and is hearing from us, like we're partnering. So I think we have to split it up. I would be okay with that, as much as I would not want to do another night meeting. If we just need to go there, I'm okay with all making it work. But whatever we got to do, but I think we might have to split it up, just listening to everybody's input, because I think Councilor Fage is correct. I think it's gonna be 4 hours plus, and probably not gonna be able to get through all that in one sitting. It might.
What's the expected outcome? Can you clarify that?
Yeah, so I think that, I guess the bottom line is that the UGB relook committee kind of went through the process and they've kind of recommended a set of principles about what they would recommend council to consider for a UGB expansion decision, not a recommendation per se, but just here, after reviewing everything, here are the principles behind that. What would be good for the community based on what we heard. But the question legitimately came up about what's really kind of triggering the need for thinking actively about an urban growth boundary expansion is the housing needs analysis that's been adopted. Like under state law, if you adopt a housing need, employment land needs analysis, the EOA, if you find that you need land of any amount, there's no requirement that a city expands its UGB to meet that employment levy. Okay, you can delay doing it. You have a document that says you need it, but the state doesn't require you to change your UGB to accommodate that employment land need you've identified. But if you've adopted a housing needs analysis, under the conditions that we're looking at, rules and such, the state does require a city to act if it identifies it doesn't have enough residential land. And the residential land that we've identified is basically identified by this housing needs analysis the city adopted. So the question is, and the UGB Real Committee asked, and the LCD talked a bit about it. But the bottom line is, if the city doesn't want to plan an urban growth boundary expansion based on the existing housing needs analysis it has the option of just repealing that housing needs analysis and saying, we're not going to grow our housing stock and expand our UGB that way, as indicated by the need in the housing needs analysis. So we're repealing. But in that housing needs analysis is also the parkland need that goes with it. And therefore, expanding with this housing needs analysis also provides the parkland that people really want, park here and a park there. That's part of it. If you repeal the housing needs analysis, you have nothing in terms of park planning either. And so the question becomes, if you repeal that housing needs analysis and you repeal with it the parks need as well as the housing need, then you have to adopt a new housing needs analysis that kind of identifies those things, but maybe less because there's a new forecast. But the thing is that with, looks like Ashley's back. But if you adopt a new housing needs analysis because you didn't like the old one, you have to adopt one under the new state law, the new system, the Oregon housing needs analysis. And we're just in a situation where we know that the new system has income level requirements to be factored in explicitly. Whereas that's not the case in the kind of the existing system and the existing housing needs analysis we have. And so the issue of whether or not to repeal this H&A and do something new, but wait a minute, that's under the new law. What are we dealing with if we do it that way, as opposed to keeping this? The state just has some questions to answer.
So what I'm trying to get out of it is this: what do we need to do mandated by law? I was under the impression last time we did all this stuff, it was mandated by law, we had to do this. So I'm hearing from horse's mouth, do we have to adopt anything? That's gonna be kind of my main thing that I want to trigger out of it. Like, what is, with the state's ones, what needs to be done, what has to be done according to that? That's kind of what I want to get out of it.
For cities of our size, yeah.
And if I could tag onto that, I think also this is, to Bill's point, this is getting the answer straight from the people, if I understand correctly, who are making a majority of the decisions. They always have access to the city.
They regulate us.
Right.
So we're going straight to the source versus hearsay.
Paying a lawyer and have a bunch of testimony and all this information coming in.
We're getting the
We know exactly what's going on, right?
So it's enabling us as a body to make a data-driven decision versus a non-data decision.
I think that's the phrase I needed,
Yeah, because we're just looking for data at this point to make the right decision.
although I really didn't like it. Data driven. There we go.
So if I might, I guess what I would say is, staff will visit the LCD to just let them know, here's the situation. We don't want to spend 4 hours in a room going over all this. And we have a planning commission that would like to just get some questions out and talk to you all sooner rather than later. So we'll work with them on a plan for whether it's a planning commission night or if it's a work session with city council, but we'll come up with a plan and we'll come back to you all. With the idea that we don't, with also budget process coming. and so we'll try to come up with a process. We'll come back with a process that try to balances all that. And again, I just want to underscore the factual reality that a budget indeed has to be adopted. And all this other stuff doesn't have to be anything. It's not like we got to do it. There's time.
All right. So what I'm hearing, just to restate, is we're going to split it up We're gonna work on scheduling a work session with the planning commission at their meeting probably. And we are going to work on kind of summing up our questions to DLCD, getting a time when they can come and provide some education and maybe make sure that those questions are part of it.
Yep.
This is kind of more of a question probably for Lori and Bill. Planning Commission meets on Wednesdays, which is when James is not available.
He's available some Wednesdays.
James speak for himself if he has a problem.
I'm available every other Wednesday.
Yeah, he's available some Wednesdays. I have his. I think I still have.
I give it compared to actually give me a one.
Yeah, I have it in the.
I guess my question was, can we legally move it to a different day if?
We wouldn't move the planning commission meeting. You would have to get the okay from the planning chair to do that.
That would be, yeah, that was just my only other.
Yeah, so,
It's just we're not in a rush for this.
yeah,
Figure out and other Sunday, another Wednesday that I'm available. Sorry. That's okay.
All right. So I think that's taking care of our unfinished business. And gosh, Bill, it sounds like it's your turn again.
Yeah, okay. So Mandy asked kind of questions that got at what I was mostly gonna talk about for budget process. Counselor Hagedorn, did you feel like that conversation about budget process earlier? I was gonna go over it in the city manager report, but if you feel like we kind of got at everything all.
Yes, in
I'll
fact,
leave-
I might take your chart and I might improve upon it and
You-
share it with people.
You please pretty it up all you want because it's Excel, it's not.
Thank you.
So I welcome any and all visual improvements.
Thank
I
you.
really do. Okay, but either way, but let me just quickly summarize. So, because I didn't get kind of into specifics, but on schedule. But we're looking right now at having a first budget committee meeting the week of April 25th. And in that first budget committee meeting, we'll go over kind of like all the important things that are driving the budget that we've been worked on, starting with what happened this weekend at the visioning session and the formation of the pillars, and then the meeting we're going to have to translate the pillars into true budget committee or true budget priorities. And then we'll kind of go through also just how we budget, like expenditure control budgeting. Departments get to save money instead of have to spend it all up right towards the end of the fiscal year. They save money and carry it over the following year. I mean, things like that. So we'll go over all that stuff. Then we have the week of May 5th, I think no later than Thursday by charter, the full budget gets released on the week of May 5th. The following week, we have our big budget committee meeting where we go through it all. And we answer questions, take questions, suggestions, go over different, possible tweaks, movement, change things. And then we have a third meeting scheduled the week of May 26th before Memorial Day weekend. That meeting 3 on the schedule, and again, this is a draft schedule. The third meeting, or at least the meeting on the 26th, is on the target schedule for when a revised final proposed budget is voted upon for approval by budget committee. Now, having said that, and Councilor Hagedorn came over and visited with me about the schedule, it's an ugly schedule, but she's looking at it, she's like, oh, wait a minute. There are weeks in between these meetings that are built in to give us flexibility to have more meetings or move things around. So, we'll have as many budget committee meetings and touch points on different things along the process so that you're hearing about things, and then when the budget committee meets, you're having a full discussion. But the main thing is we don't want to go past the week of May 25th, excuse me, May 26th. We don't want to go past that without a budget voted upon by the budget committee and sent to council for the month of June. Now, because the budget committee or half of it, a little over half, is the city council, there are no surprises when the approved budget by budget committee goes to city council. And so in the schedule, we have the budget hearing for adoption happening the first week of June, the week of June 2nd. Now that's a hearing process, and you might get more questions, you might, this, that, or the other. We have the full month of June. The next meeting is the week of June 16th. That can be a second budget And it's happened before, but that can be a second budget meeting by council to hear, ask questions and staff comes back to answer those questions or what have you. But we have to have the budget adopted before July 1st. You do have the option to have extra meetings, for, if need be. So if there's still some remaining questions about, hey, wait a minute, this or that, and we kind of want to fine tune that or whatever. You do have the option to have an extra meeting if you need for the final adoption of the budget, but the main thing is we do it before July 1st. So I don't want to paint the schedule as absolutely set in stone. I have target dates in here. We can add meetings. But the main thing is that, we have all of the month of May and all of the month of June should be sufficient for budget committee and city council before July 1st. I mean, even though the budget meetings are long, we get through them, right? I mean, honestly, like I do the comments from budget committee, environmental impact statement style. Like I give you a report of all the questions, how we responded, where and why. I mean, like it's meticulous, but we do get through it, but we get through it. And so I know it's new and big and different, but I just want to let you know, we're very careful with the process. We really
The data is very concise, the people are not. So that's our-
Always. So just a clarifying question, because thank you so much for illustrating kind of all of those steps throughout. When you were talking about those 2 June meetings where city council only rather than budget committee is reviewing those, and you had kind of said that there was this opportunity for a second meeting, we can talk about it. I just wanted to make sure I'm perfectly crisp on understanding, is that just asking questions, or is that saying something's not right, this needs to be fixed? And something can still get fixed at that point, or has the ship sailed too far?
So, I mean, because council is
Theoretically, nothing should get to that point without everybody being perfectly comfortable, because I'm new to the process, I'm just asking.
So,
If after 4 hours, we were not caffeinated enough, something slipped by the 7 of us and we go, oh my goodness, what do we do? What are our options?
well, so a couple different things. Number one, if anything needs to be changed by city council during the month of June, basically, it's because of some sort of surprise thing. Like, as an example, the last budget process, it was more complicated than this because we had the issue of whether or not the local option levy for police would pass. So we actually went through a budgeting process to come up with 4 years of budget. 2 years of budget with the levy and 2 years of budget without the levy, or at least the beginnings of a no levy scenario. And the levy didn't pass in May. And so we had to come back to the budget committee in the middle of May with we had the beginning of it. We let budget committee know we've gone down the path of this no levy budget. So we have a conservative, we're prepared to do something if the levy doesn't pass. But this budget here assumes the levy passes, and the budget committee heard it, went through the process and approved it for recommendation to council. But then the election. And so we kind of had to change things, and we did that with budget committee starting mid-May. We still delivered a budget on time and, approved by city council, but so that's the kind of thing, like something significant changes or is different that is kind of beyond, not a policy thing, but just something external that is not under our control. That would be the case or the situation where you all might have to go, whoa, or, whatever. I mean, I can't predict what it would be because most of our revenue streams are really kind of the same and don't have major factors involved. State law is not going to be changed on property taxes, so that's not anything I'm worried about. But anyway, that would be the scenario where something happens that
Falls from the sky that none of us can predict in March, and oh my goodness, yeah.
That's exactly right. And here's the other thing. What we have to have by July 1 is an adopted budget.
Doesn't have to be perfect.
It doesn't have to be perfect. We can, July 2nd, we can go back. Again, you can adopt a budget saying something's fallen from the sky. We're as responsive as we can. B, we're going to adopt this budget, but business item number 1 in July is go back and do a supplemental to change it or what have you. I mean, it's all in your control.
This is exactly what I wanted to hear
Yeah.
as a,
Oh, yeah.
a new person experiencing this process, just making sure that we are not inadvertently painting ourselves into a corner and that we understand what's flexible and what's not. So thank you very much for kind of outlining that so clearly.
Just bring coffee to the meetings.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You're needed.
It's a must.
Is tea gonna be okay? Because that's my caffeine choice.
If you put some crack in it, maybe.
Meeting started at 6, so if you need a nap, take one at 4. That's my recommendation. Does that, did that help? Okay.
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
it's a lot. I mean, it is, so please, questions are good. Okay,
Mine's kind of
no, go for it.
off the road, but, because the April water bill is probably being written now, the water letter. And doesn't the first meeting kind of meet in April?
Yes,
I'm asking if council kind of agrees, I guess, is what I'm doing here. Can we have something written up as to explain to our citizens why this is so important, why we want their input if they want to come, how to speak? I know it might be opening Pandora's box at the same time, but I
No,
think.
we tend to do that.
And it'll be in the
It's a big deal.
newsletter.
Yeah, it's a big deal. No, we put that in the water bill and then we do the newsletter as well. I mean, it is a big deal. And
And we have to do a public notice, so it's publicly noticed in the newspaper, which does anybody ever really read the newspaper anymore? Probably not. The public notice goes on the website. The public notice gets posted in the same 3 spots that all the.
I'm thinking beyond just notice, like just beyond the notice is, here's how your involvement matters.
Yeah,
I guess.
the water bill, the newsletter, and
links to
probably-
important information or things that might.
Yep.
Be of interest to you as a.
Yeah, we have a budget page.
Yeah, so,
Excellent.
no, absolutely. I mean, it's super important. It's one of those things where, we do, the more people showing up and saying, oh, yeah, we'd love to hear from, honestly, it would be great if we heard from more people, because it's tough to budget when, you all are engaged, the budget committee is engaged. We hear at different meetings, oh, we love this or we love that, but show up. Tell us, we would love to hear it.
And I'm almost breaking it down so it's not scary to enter through those doors and have to go, okay, what am I supposed to do? It's, I think, scary for some people maybe, and I don't know if there's a way to even break that down in the newsletter or.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to break down that barrier that I think might be there.
No, what I'm hearing from you is basically engagement, and I think that's maybe my ask to Teresa, I know you're on the phone, is that more than just an inform, that we're really asking for active participation and that we're giving people some knowledge of, here's what it would look like if you do show up, and if you can't show up, here's some other ways of sharing your input. I think that would be really valuable to ensure that people feel like they've had opportunities for their voices to be heard as part of such an important process.
And if you can't make it.
And if you can't make it, here's how you reach out instead. Yeah.
Well, that's always in the communication, every place I've worked. Problem is getting people to actually do the connection and do the work to come and show up at these meetings and put in their public comments. You can't force people to participate, right?
No, but maybe, and this is a broader conversation for another day, and I'm really looking forward to us having a work session on comms. But maybe there are other opportunities too for us to kind of meet people where they're at. I personally would be happy to have another session that's at a more convenient day and time than people having to come to a city council meeting. And, we can record that and we can document what people are saying, let's get people to feel like they are part of the process.
That as you were saying that, I was thinking maybe there could be an afternoon at the library where we put a little something together, at the library itself.
And with that limits of council's capacity, I I would love to offer several different opportunities because, you know, if somebody's busy for one, let's give them a different one. You know,
Right.
one's evening, one's a weekend, one's the middle of the day for those of us that are home.
Yeah.
Let's get creative. I'd love to work with you on it. And I'm excited to see what we can do.
Okay, great. Sounds good.
Detour over.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. It's quite all right. It's all part of the process. Okay, rest of the city manager report very quickly. EDC, we discussed, teen employment, trying to encourage businesses and hiring local teens. We talked about it. They're gonna take it up in detail, in May, actually. I think, I forget what the April conversation was planned to be. But they're gonna look into that in May. I think particularly with the business survey that's going out, they're gonna have some information that that can be part of that. So anyway, stay tuned. Parks Board discussed basically everything that you sent over to them. They began to talk about the nonprofit fee waiver. They're doing their research now, began discussing ordinance update, ordinance for some code update. And then really dug into the specifics for what an unexcused absence means. That was quite a conversation. So we'll be coming back with that information soon. Those are really kind of the big things I was going to address. I guess the only other thing is let me respond to some comment we got earlier about the audit. We heard some comment that had some concern about audit and nothing's happened since 2020 or 2021. And what I want to do is you know, have we responded to some comments we got in the audit for FY21 and what's happened since? What I want to let folks know is that anytime a city does get an audit, and it has what are called findings, and what you heard read off were the findings of previous audits. There were deficiencies in this, that, and that. Anytime a city gets an audit that has deficiencies, and they do occur, you know, particularly for a city that's going through transition and growing, the state requires by statute that the city go through a process of how is it going to respond to each of those deficiencies? What's the plan for improving those things? And then a commitment for when. And then that plan has to be adopted by resolution by city council, signed by the mayor, the city manager, and the finance director at the time. And for those past audits that we have, resolution 2225 has the plan for, as a result of the FY20 audit deficiencies, and the immediately following resolution 2226 of the same prior city council meeting, we addressed the issues in the FY21 audit. And the reason those two audits have action plans, one resolution after another, is because one of the things that was mentioned in comments was a federal finding. Our audit consultant back then simply misdated when an expense happened, whether it was before June 30th or after June 30th. And because, I mean, we accounted for the expense, but it was just misdated. And so we actually had to reopen and redo the FY20 audit. And then, you know, redo at the last minute the FY21 audit. So that basically started the ball rolling on why things have been late. That bizarre federal audit misdated but accounted expense. But we can go over those resolutions at another time, and the plan, the information we submitted to the Department of Revenue. But all of the deficiencies that were found back then had by then and continue to be practiced. We have formal internal control procedures that the city didn't have then and never had before, but we've implemented those. And now we go through a multi-step process where at least 2 or 3 different staff members are involved at different stages of the process, from entering invoices to invoice approval by the different department heads, to check review approval, and then somebody completely different signing those checks. So we have this multifaceted, complicated process to this day we still do. And the other thing that were found in previous audits that's also very different from now is we had prior great employees that were in finance that had no finance public accounting background. And it just kind of resulted in findings because of that. I mean, they did their job, they were hardworking people, but the city just didn't have folks with background in public accounting. Since that time, we have employed and kept people who have that experience and background. So that way, the audit that's remaining that we're at the final stages of, that'll reflect changes that we made and reflect employees we have now with proper background in public accounting. And so what you'll see moving forward is that the audit findings are less, if anything at all, and they're better. So anyway, but we'll get there. But the bottom line is that's the history.
One thing I want to share from budget training and from my private sector experience. We go through this often and the board has to sign off on it. It's very similar from what I've seen, but also in the DOR, Department of Revenue actually told us that this would happen. And then once I saw that and read the audit finding made a lot more sense because they told us like you will have controls that are not right. Everybody does. You're not going to go to prison for this. It has to get corrected, like Bill said. So once understanding that and going back and rereading audit, it does make a lot more sense what you're saying.
Yeah, you want to do the best you can. You want to aspire to and meet all of the requirements, but city audits frankly are more about what the process was during the course of the year of making sure things were done the right way so that there was less room for fraud. The other thing I will say about our audits is that there's always been an independent finance consultant involved in pulling together financial statements and then a separate auditor who reviews that. So it's not like city employees are creating things and then turning it over to an auditor. We actually have an independent person going through and pulling our information together and checking our work. And then what they pull together is what the auditors review. So there's kind of this two-step process. Anyway, so when we met with you, as I say in the staff report for finance and in the Friday 5, we met last week with the auditor just to give them an update on all the work we had done. And they were satisfied with all the progress that we had made. So a time will come in the future where they'll come and speak to you all about what the process has been and what the audit is going to do or will show. But they don't need to yet. So.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Sure.
All right. And now we have another line item where Bill's going to talk. No, I'm kidding. You are off the hook.
Why, thank you.
Finance and city manager back to back is unfit. I'm sorry. Council reports.
I got fun about what's been going on in Dodge, so it was great. Thank you, Chief. And I'm down playing as is Councilor Page, so I'm sure we'll have to fix that later.
Yep. I had the economic development meeting 2 weeks ago, I think it was, and I talked to them about workshopping, getting teams involved, and I want more clarification about that. What do you mean? A little bit of feedback was that they would like to have better communication of the direction they want to go and why. The why is a really important thing because they want to know which avenue to go down. So why is an important deal. Communicated to them that people on Facebook and myself also have teenage kids and they have to drive to Hillsborough to find jobs. However, there's not a whole lot of businesses out here, and those that can hire kids do because they're cheaper. But what can we do to help make that happen? And they're gonna look into it, but they don't really have great guidance on it, and they kind of want to know more about that.
Thank you so much on sharing the feedback that we need a better way of communicating those asks down to committee. That's actually something that I heard too. And let me know if anybody else wants to go or I'll take my turn. Okay. Let me find my notes because I need to thank Katie. I was actually unable to go and I watched on YouTube. So I went to Parks and noticed some of the same kind of consternation that there was a lack of understanding about what we had been asking them to do as far as how we kind of socialized out the city comms. And, you know, one of the one of the suggestions that came out of that conversation was that the individual members of the Parks Committee could share the city Facebook posts on their individual social media, which is thoughtful. But maybe if we were more clear that we were looking for something in the context of a program or something official that we as a city could get behind and potentially invest in, I think that might have gone better. One of the other things that I was going to suggest, just again, my personal feedback is that I almost wonder whether these council reports could be more meaningful if, for example, we did something as simple as projected the agenda of the meeting that one of us attended, so that if other folks on council might spot an agenda item and go, yeah, I was really wondering about that. Hey, James, when economic development talked about whatever, and then you'd know what to say and we'd all get the information that we needed. So that might potentially be something that we could consider for the future. And I would really love to be thoughtful about how we can get better information down to our committees, because that's two now, economic development and parks, that we've tried. And I think we had a miss on our end and have an obligation to do better. So maybe we can all noodle on what that might look like to be more effective. But just in case you all are interested, I do have a topic summary of what Parks talked about. They reviewed their bylaws regarding the absences. Yes, I listened to the same very thorough discussion, and they landed on Parks and Recreation Committee. They're going to be investigating some other local facility rentals to get context on the Jessie Mays fee structure. They also created a subcommittee, which I was excited to see, with Dawn and Matt and Zach regarding the park and program needs as far as what their budget ask is going to be. They discussed those comms options. Like I said, I think we had a bit of a disconnect there with resharing the city Facebook posts on personal social media. And there's a new dog waste station here at Jessie Mays, over in that corner right there. They are going to be talking about duties ideas in their next meeting, and another future meeting. They'll be discussing cyclist parking here at Jessie Mays, so that those parking spots are available for folks at the park and at events. And lastly, real exciting, the Garlic Festival received the Ovation Award for small festivals. So congratulations.
So can I get clarity? You were sitting in for, because I didn't get an email that you weren't gonna be there, so you were sitting in for.
On Zoom,
Mayor,
yeah.
Oh, and you were on Zoom?
Yep.
I was on Zoom, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Are you finished, Aria?
I am.
Mayor. So I attended planning commission and I forgot my notes, so I'm trying to quickly summarize here in my head what I can remember. And as already expressed, they very much so want follow up with us, so I'm really excited that that's already been established and we're going forward with that. Commissioner Labonte brought up great points that I agreed with. We talked about how everybody liked the UGB map that brought in Lind Reservoir. And we've got to know if the water rights transfer before we can, before we consider bringing in that property. Is it even possible to keep it filled? Because right now I believe it's irrigation filled. And if it becomes a park, I don't think you can use irrigation water rights for filling a park. And then we also talked about insurance, passive versus active for water. So passive would be fishing, active would be swimming. Numbers were not given on the cost difference, but that would be great to know in the future before we bring that land in as well. Because I'm thinking that's a big part of what this park is going to be for. And then I kind of felt frustrated with the direction. I felt council here agreed for planning commission to let us know code that they were concerned with. And it felt like they really got stuck on the neighborhood, community neighborhood zoning, and how there's only like 1 acre in Sunset Ridge that's really zoned that way. And is that really worth it? And I didn't speak up, and I should have, saying it's not just that one type of zoning. It's any zoning that you guys are worried about, such as the green light zoning that we just ran into. And so it kind of got derailed and put back to, well, we'll wait and see what comes of that.
So
one
maybe-
little acre. And so kind of, I'm hoping we can circle back and really say, no, I started with the neighborhood zoning because Stuart King and I had Commissioner King and I had kind of discussed that in our email. I think I forwarded that all to all of you. But I think I made it pretty clear, I opened it up to any problems that they saw that were really urgent. And it kept coming back to, well, the TGM grant will take care of that, TGM grant will take care of that, but that's not for about a year to 18 months. That will start, that code will start being enacted. And so I think our city is open to some pitfalls in the meantime, and so I really want the planning commission to be able to let us know what they're concerned about.
So the planning commission members got stuck on the neighborhood community zone, or?
It just kind of hyper-focused on that.
Okay.
And I think it was missed that it was anything that they felt was a problem.
So I mean, that's 3 for 3 then, that's planning commission not understanding clearly what city council was trying to communicate. And I don't know.
And I didn't have the paper that I'd written to read. So I could read.
Yeah,
reinforce what
so
their direction had been.
I don't know, this is something for us to noodle on, and it's late and I don't think we can solve it now, but I think it's really important for us to figure out what that feedback loop looks like, or what the output of a city council meeting when we're getting ready to send direction down. I mean, do we need?
Well, and I did make an error. I didn't include Bill on the original email, so he got that email late, so that's my error.
No, I think it's happened 2 other times without that, so it's something else that we can talk about. Maybe can we put an agenda item next city council meeting for us to, do we have general agreement here that we can talk about this?
It gives some chance to think about how to do this as well.
Yeah.
How to communicate to
The boards and planning commissions and.
Pass down.
Yeah, how those platforms work. So I'm just looking around. Yes, consensus agenda next time.
We'll discuss that. Okay, so thank you. So right now for April 7th. So now we're talking agenda. Good.
Like how we
Thank
did
you.
that?
That's, yeah, amazing. The
Did we
the
get
segue
the-
was amazing. So April 7, what I have right now is this under new business, discussing budget priorities given new pillars. Okay. That's one that I have.
It's a must have.
That's a new one under new business. And then this second one under second new business item. Coordination and communication with boards and committees. So that would be a new business item too. So those are the 2 new business items right now on the agenda for the 7th. I also have, and this was something for you all to discuss. I have the communications plan. It was adopted, 1 or 2 years ago. It's time for reviewing it and maybe updating it, because that then leads to everything we do communication wise, implementing it. So we have that on the April 7th work session. What I sent out in an email last week was our library department hasn't yet been able to come before you in a budget, in kind of an operations and budget type discussion like we had with Public Works, or the beginning of with Public Works. And it sounds like we'll need to continue doing with Public Works. So what I want to put before you, what I suggested in the email, and I know Mayor is communication is a priority. But what I wanted to put before you is library, before you all hear your budget, really does deserve a work session to go over, because it's our most front-facing department. It singly has the most employees of one department. And then it's kind of an odd animal in that we're a member of the Washington County Cooperative Library System. That system is planning major change. And all the while, we have to target and maintain their service levels. So how we budget for it and think about it is kind of a separate animal in a way than some of the other things that we do. And so it's a big piece of the puzzle that sooner rather than later at a work session or however, it would be really important for you all to hear. So I have on the April 7th work session, the communication plan. My suggestion was to bump communication, everything back one and put library on the 7th. You don't have to do that, but that's up to you. I would just urge you library sooner rather than later, you know, you have that session.
First of all, Robin, I will apologize to you that we managed to let your report sail today without us spending time talking about budget, which might have been maybe a helpful thing. Sorry about that. But it sounds like maybe we need to ask the question a slightly different way because we need to give Robin time. We also need to give Dustin some more time than we gave him because we talked a lot about water, although it was very interesting. So can we get creative? And, you know, I'm sure you're going to need to talk to us too, to get that FaceTime with our tower leaders to make that conversation possible in a timely manner for budget. Is there a way that we can kind of provide this opportunity to all of the various city staff who need to get this message across in kind of a cohesive manner so that we're presenting them with space to do some very important work?
Are you looking for suggestions or is this a rhetorical question?
I think at this point, my feeling would be let's leave 4-7 as it is, but I really would like to do some brainstorming, whether now, when we're all tired and it's almost 10 o'clock is the time, or whether, again, we kind of circle back and Bill, you've got years of how this has been done before to kind of refer to. We've got fresh new ideas. Let's try and figure out a way that we can provide all of our staff towers with an opportunity to have this good conversation.
Trying to think like 20 minutes for each of you, is that enough and not enough?
For pitch, for what?
Yeah, for what
can
we're discussing, I don't know.
Sure.
We gotta start spitballing or.
I think Counselor Page recommended some questions in advance, and then if I have that, I could sort of tailor my presentation to what your questions are and make it shorter potentially.
I think that the mayor is suggesting that we're toward the budget, everybody wants to have their voice heard about their needs and wants. And she wanted to give you that opportunity before.
20 minutes.
Right.
I mean,
Unless you have a lot of questions.
my 2 cents is budget. Budget's due July. So the more information we have going into budget, the better we are. The communications plan would be nice to get done, but the budget's mandatory. So however we can arrive at a budget that meets the needs of the city, if that means we need font communications, then that's my suggestion. I think that's critical to have all the data before you can make decisions, in my view.
Is the next agenda heavy? Like, could we fit all 3 of the big pillars in a work session in 20-minute increments? And then at the end, if we've got time, can we throw in the communication?
We can have a work session at the end as well as the beginning.
Well, I mean, right now for the April 7th, just look at the calendars to make sure. So
I think we just said it was budget with the new pillars, coordination and comms with boards and committees, and the council.
If I could put a pin in that, how we brainstorm, how we're going to communicate.
Yeah,
I think it'd be better to talk to the boards we have coming next month and ask them how they like to communicate.
great
And then keep it-
idea. That'd be a great email request.
Okay.
Maybe a survey.
And council take the money.
I think we're all spitballing here. I think all I will just throw in there is I do want to be equitable that all the departments get their allotted time. And I love the idea of, could we allot 30 minutes during the next city council meeting, or does that run into like blurred lines?
So
I think it could be a work session after. Like it wouldn't be during, but it'd be.
Yeah, I mean, you could do a work session after, I guess, right now for the agenda for the 7th, Sheriff Massey is going to come and give annual report to you all for the Washington County Sheriff's Office. So she'll be here. So she'll give a presentation probably with a PowerPoint that will last about as long as the Justice Center did tonight. We will probably, maybe not, but either on the 7th or the 21st under new business, you will adopt a resolution adopting your pillars. Adopting your, vision and pillars. I mean, that actually needs to be adopted in order for it to filter into the budget process, actually. We'll talk about how it does at the next meeting. But at some point, either on the 7th or the 21st, you formally adopt them. You have 2 agenda items under new business and right now, and that is communication with your boards and commissions and budget committee, or excuse me, budget priority. I think you could probably just in your meeting or whether it's a work session after, I think honestly, I would prefer to work since Dustin, I think I would rather work with Dustin on distilling down on the budget side of things because he started to go into it, but I'd rather work with him on kind of bringing that in a way that really is pointed about budget for him. I'd rather work with him on that and kind of bring that back to you and kind of give Robin a bit more of a free discussion, kind of like others have had before. That would be my preference. So I guess what I would say is in your meeting, I can work with Dustin and we can have kind of a presentation in the regular meeting that, okay, looking forward for Public Works, these are the budget issues and priorities. Because he has some very important ones, but we want to kind of rank them so that you're thinking about them moving into that. So my suggestion would be a work session for Robin. If she doesn't do the whole thing, we can begin Public Works and continue it or whatever. But I think we could distill down a Public Works into a presentation under unfinished business in the regular meeting is how I would suggest handling.
Does
Sold by
Chief
me.
Jones not get a presentation?
No.
Or did we already? No,
He's-
okay.
He's
That's
not
why I
gonna
said 30,
be-
20 minutes.
He's-
Sorry, I didn't-
Well,
Planning.
yeah, I mean, we do need to do something with Chief, but he's Washington County contract.
Okay, no.
And so-
that's why I had said that.
Yeah, so what we'll get from Washington County Sheriff's Office is we'll get the formal estimate of what carrying forward 3 FTEs will be in the next fiscal year. And then that will be the leaping off point for saying, well, how much, we'll know exactly, we can extrapolate how much more it's gonna cost. I think over less than an hour, Chief can kind of talk about how we can create a path to more FTEs, but we'll have an idea of how expensive it is. Because when we talk about the cost of FTEs with police, we're talking about the cost of all in evidence storage, vehicles, ammo, training, away time for this, that, and the other. The numbers for police service per FTE are high because of all that. It's gonna be like, he doesn't get paid that much. There's just all these costs that go into it. Trust me, if he got paid that much, I'd be doing that. So, but that's kind of in a way an easier conversation because it's about a path, given what we know, these are very real costs. What's a path that Chief can work with us on to get you to more patrol? Because it's not cheap. That's the bottom line. But running like a city department, city funded, staffed and all the things that go with it, it would be good for you all to hear from Robin with a little more time.
So what are we deciding?
He has a plan. We're good.
So I would just reiterate, I would suggest that we basically just give Robin, I would recommend that to you all that Robin get the work session. And we can work, and Robin might determine, we need 40 minutes, we'll figure that out, but let's, Robin and library doing a work session and talking WCCLS, certainly the department, but WCCLS. And then I can work with Dustin on the Public Works budget specific distillation of kind of what you began to hear. And then I think Chief in not very long can kind of talk about your thoughts about how to get to more patrol. And what that might look like. But our numbers are from the county and those are the numbers. I mean, there's no there's no take money out of patrol and put it into this. Like that's the contract cost.
I mean, my feeling is if we are pushing something like comms, that let's take that hour on the 7th, let's split it between the 3 of you. And Steve, if he feels he needs some time, but you said 20 minutes, I'm gonna take you at your word. And so let's turn that work session into whatever hybrid model it needs to be. And then I'll reiterate that I would love to talk about the whole comms plan more officially, and that definitely is a work session, but you know, let's start talking about ways that we can improve our communications and start partnering with Therese and, you know, move the needle forward while we're waiting for that. I guess it's gonna be April 21st when we have that comms work session.
Can I suggest that maybe that 1 hour work session is amongst the 3 departments at least represented here, that we can just maybe divide that time out?
You are more than welcome to figure it out organically.
45, or we can kind of work that out amongst ourselves.
If you arm wrestle, I want to know who wins, but yes.
We want good PowerPoints.
Yeah.
Good
You would win the
PowerPoints.
arm.
Videos,
Videos.
yes. Good jokes.
Take them to the checkpoints.
Okay, I think, hold on, let me check. Do we need to review our calendar?
No.
Lori, do we need to review our calendar?
Was that you? I'm almost afraid to answer, not unless anybody needs to make a change on their ex officio duties.
Everybody feeling good?
Please just let me know. Please just let me know when you're gonna make a change,
Fair
so that I know ahead of time.
Comment, I think, didn't we say that the library board starts at 6, not 7?
I changed it.
It's still on here, I'm sorry.
On which one? The colored one?
Yeah, the 2025,
It's
whatever.
listed in like 4 places and.
But
I
also,
imagine that's super complicated.
the other thing, I just wanted to let you know before I left, on the agenda, it said 2024 calendar, it's 2025,
2020.
right? On the review 2025 calendar,
Oh,
yeah,
12.
unless I'm misreading something.
Under review, April 2025 calendar, it says 2024 calendar.
Oh, that one. Oh, yeah. That's version 3 too.
I know.
I appreciate everybody being so.
I love it when everybody brings my mistakes out in the open.
Sorry,
All right,
I'm
so
used to it.
I feel like we talked about this recently and we decided we didn't need a motion to adjourn, but do
We
we
do
want
not.
a motion to adjourn or
not.
do we just feel like we're all done?
You call it.
we're done.
All right, we are calling it at 9:55 PM. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Go team.
Okay.
Oh, I